Are they on your email?
I can hear now. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Cool.
Can't get it. Well, we might be able to plug it in. If it's on your computer. It's not. I don't have them.
But you had them from, you sent them to us last time. Are they those?
Well,
Or new ones.
it hasn't changed much since last time I did the photos.
Those are,
So
that's,
Maybe just describe what the changes.
okay.
You did send them.
What are?
Can Kit hear us?
What do we need?
Kit, he has photos that are too large.
Or you can email
Doesn't have them on it. He doesn't have them.
them. Yeah, but you can email it to Jody and I right now.
He doesn't have them on a digital.
Oh,
There's about,
I can't get you.
there's about. And I can help. So I'd have to send to emails.
Do you have?
Yeah.
On your computer? You have the USB port?
I have a USB port.
Oh, Noelle can get. I get Noelle. Noelle has.
Either that or just email the one photo that shows the Jeep is changed. You know, so
As
it's
long
easier.
as Kit has your latest and greatest.
I don't, do you remember the date of the photos I gave you guys?
it was the week before the first go round. So it's been but you emailed those about a week before.
Yeah. Okay, then I have them, because
Did you ever email?
I don't think I emailed, I think I just. gave you guys-
They were in the packet, online.
It's 10 o'clock and gonna have. some time before you get there.
Okay.
So you got a few minutes if you wanna.
If they're on the packet online, then that should work.
I didn't.
Well, no, Carolina was, they're not.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Do you have any options?
Noelle
And then we can just. get on Carolyn.
Oh, what the city
And I'll
was.
put it up on the story. And I'll let Noelle know you're coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where you want to be.
Okay, we're live.
Good morning, Commissioner. Can you hear us okay?
I can. Morning.
Okay,
Good morning.
awesome. All right, I will call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for February 9th, 2023. It is 10:04 in the morning. Jody, would you please lead us in the flag salute, please?
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item C is our calendar session. We have, I noticed on 2/14, there's a Willamina work session. Is that on your calendar as well?
I didn't submit it, but yeah, you're right.
Somehow it showed up on our calendar. It's like a work session for the city. Okay, I'll send you the info.
Yes.
And then on February 15th is a Willamette Workforce Partnership meeting in Salem at 12:30. And of course, all commissioners are invited to that. And then we had spoken about an executive session possibly on the 16th, next Thursday.
Correct. We would like to go ahead and schedule that executive session. And I know there's a couple items for discussion, so I'd recommend that we do it immediately after adjourning formal.
Okay. Does that sound okay, Commissioner Johnston?
Yes.
Okay, so we will get the executive session on the calendar for 2/16 immediately following the formal session. Anything else to add to the calendar? Nope. Okay. Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. We do have one comment from Mr. Tom Hammer. Welcome, Tom.
Morning.
Please state your
Morning,
name.
Tom.
Tom Hammer. I live in rural Yamhill County. Chair Burschauer, Commissioner Sterrett, Commissioner Johnston. My topic is the lawsuit that Yamhill County is involved in, the lawsuit challenging the constitutionality of mail-in voting. I'll just read what I've going to say here. 2 months ago, I sent a public statement to the Board of Commissioners asking that Yamhill County withdraw from the motion to dismiss a suit brought against the Secretary of State in 12 counties. If a county does not move to dismiss, the case cannot go forward. The suit was dismissed, but a second one has been filed by the same plaintiffs, led by Mark Thielman and represented by Steve Jonkus, naming the Secretary of State in all 36 counties. I ask that the BOC invite Mr. Thielman here in the next couple of weeks and make the matter an agenda item. Statistical and anecdotal evidence of election irregularities exist sufficient to warrant a review of the need for this suit to move forward. Election integrity deserves a public discussion, which will happen if the points in contention are argued in a courtroom setting. As I stated 2 months ago, there is no evidence that our county clerk's office is doing anything wrong. The assertions are that the irregularities happen outside of the control of that office. Steve Jonkus assures that the suit will not impugn the name of our clerk nor threaten her career. Mark Thielman, a former school district superintendent, assures me that special districts of Oregon will pay the minor legal costs Yamhill County would incur in hiring outside counsel to handle procedural items. And then I list Thielman's phone number and the website where the complaint can be viewed. That's all I got.
Thank you, Tom. Do you know, so I read that this morning. Is that the comment about SDAO paying for the legal fees, is that an assumption that it goes through insurance, or is it SDAO has made a commitment to pay for those?
I talked with Mr. Thielman about that just a week ago today, and he said that his experience as the superintendent of a school district did not call that insurance, but that he called it risk mitigation or risk something. He says it's the same as insurance, and that money is available to cover those costs up to 250,000. And the estimates are that it would be very minor. I don't know,
Okay.
5 to 10 for the county just to hire somebody who's familiar with how to procedurally handle these things.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we'll have to touch base with him because SDAO covers special districts. The county's not necessarily a special district, so I'm not sure where
Be
he's
mistaken in that regard, and I don't know, but
I know.
I'm just encouraging
Okay.
the board to establish contact with him. You cannot establish contact with the attorney, Steve Jonkis, but you can with the plaintiff.
Okay.
Okay,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Hammer.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, any other public comment for anything that is not on the agenda or part of a land use hearing or public hearing? And if you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, seeing none. Item E is our department updates, and today we have our county assessor, Derek Wharf, joining us. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you.
Oh, sure. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Sitting in the background. I have some handouts because I have some numbers to go over and it's kind of confusing to follow. Is it appropriate to have handouts? Okay, to give you guys to follow along? Yeah, you're just gonna have to.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll wing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to be in person and to give a department update. It's been a minute since we've had this discussion, and I'm thankful to share and celebrate the success our department has experienced. We've been very on top of getting through COVID, out of COVID, and back to business. So got some things to cover for you, give you an update on what we're doing. And again, I'm just thankful for the opportunity to be able to do this in person. So
Derek, would you please, for the record, introduce your guests, your team?
I have them. Yes, I'll go ahead and I'll jump down here. If you're following along there about when I'm talking about the appraisal team, I asked Susan to join us. Susan DeBolt has been with the county for 32 years. She's an instrumental part of our appraisal team. She's a wealth of knowledge regarding where the department has been, what we've been working on, and where we're going. And thank you, Susan, for your years of service on the appraisal team. And when I talk about appraisal, you'll realize how much work she puts in. A little farther down on the back page, there's a special programs update we'll be talking about. And Roxanne Henderson is with us today, and with us, myself and Susan. Roxanne oversees our exemptions program, as well as doing general office, front office support, and some cartography and deed work. When we talk a little bit about the groups we have in our team, we have three. We have the tax side, the appraisal side, and cartography. And Roxanne dabbles in both the tax and cartography world. And I think you've been with us 5 years? 6? 7? Yay, you're almost a longevity pay.
What? Tell me more.
Okay, so thank you. And I'm, for those watching, I'm Derek Wharf, the Yamhill County Assessor and Tax Collector. Okay, so in general, I got a couple of just high level things I want to discuss. Our office is leading the state in several platform and business model initiatives. We've been recognized at a couple of conferences We have 2 conferences a year, and in both scenarios, we've either put on presentations or been acknowledged by our peers as assisting with the development of new workflows and business practices that they have now taken on, or at least starting to take on, in hopes that they can see some similar efficiencies and gains in what we've developed and what we've put out there. So that's been a real win over the last 2 years, year and a half. The initiative started 3 or 4 years ago. They're becoming more seasoned. So we started with, we needed tools to do more with what we had, less bodies, better technology. And through the development of aerial imagery and what we call mobile assessor or field work devices and those sort of things, we're now really benefiting from all that. So it was a little bit of a climb. Susan can attest to the effort that was put in to get through the setup, the implementation, the hurdles. And now we're really reaping the benefits. And some of that will show when we talk about numbers here below, but it's been a process, and we can see the start line. There's a heck of a race to the start line, but we see it. Okay. A quick legislative update. We working with Osaka, that's the Oregon State County Assessors Association, the Department of Revenue, AOC, and district reps. We are working on a funding stabilization initiative. That's to say that the expenses relative to assessment and tax continue to grow. Personnel expenses, software and licensing, those sort of things. And the burden is solely on the county's general fund to pick that up. The small grant that we get from the state through CAFA has been somewhat consistent, but is flat, it's not indexed. So its contribution in terms of the proration of the pro rata share, of all expenses has dwindled. CAFA used to cover about 40% of expenses, and now it's down to, for us, 10 or 12. So the thought is, well, we either need to remodel that CAFA program to recapture what it was initially intended to do, offset about 30-40% of expenses, or we need a different funding mechanism that's more permanent and less dependent solely on the general fund. So with that, there's a work group. I've been assigned by the chair, Rep. Nathanson, to serve on that committee and that work group. All sorts of ideas are coming out of that. It's really just kind of getting warmed up. The second work group legislatively has to do with M&E around farm equipment. We had an appeal of a decision that we didn't allow certain machinery and equipment into an exemption program in 2015. And it really started a conversation statewide around what is used in the process of farming. What machinery and equipment, what personal property, where's the line? Where's the line between this is exempt because it's used in farming and this is not exempt because it's no longer farming, it's now manufacturing, production, or something else. So we happen to be the catalyst and are currently the linchpin of that. So I think this work group will come up with a solution that better defines what is farming activity, what is related to that in terms of personal property and machinery and equipment. And then that'll give some guidance and some clarity statewide to farmers and those in the industry as to what they should be reporting for tax purposes and what is considered exempt. So big initiative there on the farm side, and then the A&T work group is the other one. Something else comes up between now and the session. I don't know that I'll have this opportunity again, but I would reach out to you individually if we get traction on something that is tax property based and has meaningful impact on county, the districts, that sort of thing. Right now, I don't see anything on the radar other than these two.
Is there a specific bill for that M&E one?
There is. I don't have it in front of me. I could guess at the number, but I'll just shoot it out.
Okay.
I'll get it back to you.
And then we discussed a bill in AOC. I can't remember which committee that was, but it was regarding drones, the use of drones.
Oh,
I believe we voted to oppose it because it was limiting the use of drones. I don't know if that plays into the aerial imagery that we do or any type of photography over large,
we do use high resolution aerial imagery captured at 30,000 feet. So
Okay, so
with
that maybe
planes that are flown for various reasons and not just for capturing our imagery for our purposes. It's really a statewide solution for other agencies, sheriffs and 911 and even insurance companies that want to look at roof lines. Nothing done with drones, nothing low level.
Okay.
But I haven't seen that to see if it has, you know,
There
portions of
were-
it that talk about aerial imagery.
Yeah, there were some exemptions for
I
that.
think there were exemptions that would include what you're doing.
You know, if the sheriff has to use it or whatever,
Mhm.
but.
Search and rescue.
Some counties apparently use them for, you know, property evaluation and looking at certain
We do.
buildings that.
He has,
So-
yeah. We've worked with him on ingress and egress to properties. If they're looking at a property that
Mhm.
they may need to get on or enter, they want to know where to come in from and where the
Mhm.
access points are. They use our imagery platform for that. They're one of
Yeah.
a dozen agencies, either within the county or other stakeholders that use the imagery we provide.
Okay.
Question about that HB 2088. I think we talked about this in governance, and that would have to do with basically apportioning the taxing a certain fee for the tax and assessment services.
Yeah, I'm not sure if fees the right word. Right now, the concept as it sits is we would withhold 3% of distribution.
Okay.
So whatever's been levied for that district, a portion would be held back to cover administrative costs of appraisal, levy the tax, bill the tax, collect the tax, and distribute the tax,
Right.
which now is burdened by the county solely. So that's one option. I think the work group was assembled to look at various options. And we have probably 10 or 12 we're looking at. So some of those have more legs than others, and we'll see where it ends up. The willingness of districts and cities to share in the burden is really the first hurdle. We got to get past, you know, the mindset of, are you willing to put in for the services you're receiving, or fundamentally, do you believe you don't have that responsibility? So if we can get past that, we can start talking what the mechanisms are, how much,
Mhm.
you know, durations and the caps, sideboards. But at the moment, and historically, that service is already funded through what we already have in place, and should be the obligation of the county is the mindset. But now that's gone so far the other way that the original space that was approved in, if you will, with the CAFA contributing to 40% is now out of balance. Right, so we ask for discretionary income or discretionary revenue every year because we are solely personnel. We're all expense. I can remove, for budget purposes, I can remove revenue and material and services. They don't move the needle in terms of the need for our department. That's a personnel number and comes out of discretionary. So, yeah, and it's not unique to Yamhill County. That same ratio of what CAFA used to provide and what CAFA provides now is consistent throughout the state. Some counties have other revenue streams that help to offset that issue. We really don't. We sell some data for fraction of a percent of what revenue is. So it really comes down to, are we going to offset or find a way to continue funding A&T through a different source than the general fund?
What other sources would other counties have?
Well, I think of metro counties, and they have different revenue streams through programs that are collected. I don't know specifically how they do it. Their tax base is also significantly larger, so their discretionary impact is not as felt, maybe. But different fees and programs that they administer at the county level can create revenue. If they sell more of something for 25 cents, they sell a whole bunch of them, it counts. You know, we sell copies or something for small fees. It just doesn't generate enough to move the needle. But in a larger setting, it might. So those sort of things. Yeah, this is the third full session I've been involved in trying to get some legs under this, and it feels like it has more energy this time than ever before. So,
Thank you.
especially with the support of AOC, we're very thankful for that. And we are having discussions with LOC in small districts, so that's a good start. And in school districts. Obviously, the movers there. Okay, so that's the legislative. Now I'll get into our department, what we've been working on, and I want to again reiterate that we are comprised of 3 groups. Our team is made up of the appraisal area, the tax folks up front, and then our cartography and GIS. That is actually 1.5 people. Roxanne serves as the assistant to Brian in cartography and GIS, and some other office support can help. But really, it's it's Brian and a support staff. We need to look at what that means longer term, but for now, that's what that is. But to starting with appraisal, I've already introduced Susan. Susan, again, so thankful to have you on the team and the work you put in to get us off of our legacy system onto new software and then onto new tools within that software to now 7 years later, be where we are today. And you don't have to take milk crates out in the field. You don't have to carry like you're camping for the weekend. You can just take your iPad. In 2023, we'll complete approximately 6,000 permits. To date, the appraisal team, starting in November, we start new construction review. So we're going out on new construction permits that have been issued by the various jurisdictions. We're looking for evaluation of January 1st. So we try to frame, 3 months before, 3 months after to get as close as we can to January 1st. Right now, they're about 75% complete with inspections. And that is a huge accomplishment. In years past, new construction would last all the way till June. When we were paper-based, it was all in the field, data entry, repeat the data entry in the office. It was very manual. It was very time labor intensive, intensive. So that's just one example of how we've created efficiencies through redoing our workflows and our business model. And with that extra time and space, we've done some of these other things that I'll talk about. So the preliminary numbers in terms of what we see coming down the road, what do we think we're going to put on the roll for this coming year with those 6,000 permits? It's looking like 400 million in real market value for the total, 300 million of that residential, 90 million in commercial, with the balance being multifamily and some miscellaneous accounts. So still heavily on the residential, urban residential to be more specific side of things. And then there are some commercial developments and everything else is sort of a mix. Okay. One thing I did want to mention and thank Jay Moskal. He is the appraisal team chief appraiser. And he as Susan and the field appraisers work on the end user part of this initiative, Jay was instrumental in developing the administrative side of that. So he works on gathering permits into a platform, issuing the permits to the appraisers, following up to make sure we're completing them in accurate and timely manner, and so on and so forth. It was a whole nother platform development that needed to take place on the administrative side. And Jay and even Jeff Jeff Ivy, our deputy assessor, were responsible for some of that. So things are going well, very well in the new construction permit gathering space and arena. In 2018, we reported that we were going to start a countywide reappraisal. I think at some point I've talked to everybody about the fact that we hadn't reappraised the county in 25 plus years. That not necessarily neglect from other predecessors or assessors. It was really when Measure 50 came in, there was less need, if you will, to have very current real market values. It was more about MAV, maximum assessed value, excuse me. But 25 years later, inventory in terms of what we know to be out there, what's on site, we just had lost control over what that was. So we started a program to do reappraisal in 2018. Here we are 4 years later, and we've completed all urban residential accounts. So that's 22,000 plus accounts. Those are all incorporated areas. So we've reviewed all those, verified inventory, reconciled our records to what's on site. We found a lot of new stuff, and we found a lot of stuff that unfortunately was removed and we hadn't been notified. So as many people as we added for having omitted property, we probably took off as much for people who had demoed or destroyed something that we weren't aware of either.
Interesting.
That kind of goes back to that keeping your inventory current so that you're fair and equitable in your assessment. Multifamily and manufactured home parks, we did 2,500 accounts there. And where we're at right now, so in this current cycle, we are working on rural residential, which is is the most time and labor intensive. We're going out to properties that are not only very large, but they can have significant improvements in different locations. You could be on a property that's got barns in the far back for cattle and something else up front by the house. Maybe there's 2 houses, 3 houses. All that is just the complexities of going rural. We have about half the rural properties done, and that's what the team is focusing on in reappraisal for this next year.
And we notify people when that's happening?
We have a postcard, thank you, that
Postcard,
goes
yeah.
out that says, we're going to be in your area.
Gotcha.
We do that geospatially, knowing that we're looking at if it's Grand Island or wherever we're going to be. We'll send them to those folks. And then we did quite a few phone calls. What is this about? What's going on? And it's just an opportunity to educate them and say, hey, this is your assessment team, and we're here to make sure that we've got your inventory correct, that our records match. In general, I think well received, maybe not open the door and come and have coffee, but
Right.
5 years ago, it was not. When we first kicked it off and it was just hitting the county, there's a lot of questions about why and what's the
Yeah.
intent, what's it going to mean?
Yeah.
But now we're sort of in the routine. And the objective here long-term is to create a cycle that we go back so we don't get 20 years out of compliance.
Mhm.
That we look at maybe 5 years as the annual, touch every property, see it one way or another, whether we see it through aerial imagery, boots on the ground, some other method. We should keep the inventory current so that we're not doing this whole effort again years down the road. 65% of commercial and industrial properties have been reappraised. That one is a little twofold because not only are we reappraising commercial industrial, we're also converting when appropriate to a different valuation method. Historically, we've used a cost approach to value commercial properties, solely a cost approach. That is, what does this cost to build? There are certain property types that is not the most appropriate valuation method. They should be valued on an income approach. Apartment complexes come to mind. So, what are rents doing? What is the income stream look like? What's the NOI on the facility? What would it sell for in the open market? What's the highest and best use? Those things we didn't really have in play as tools. Our software was limiting us. Now we've developed again with Jay and this particular initiative is John Hockman, our commercial appraiser. They've come up with a model that says income properties can now be valued on income, and it's a much more appropriate valuation. One of the things that happens at the end of the year is we report to the state on what we call our annual ratio report. And while it has a lot of statistical elements to it, the overarching idea of the ratio report is it's a sense of how good is your appraisal program, right? So if you're in sort of very layman's terms, it's what do we appraise things at and what do they sell for? And how close is that? How close are we to the market? And over the last 5-6 years, that relationship has gotten very tight. We are exceeding the minimum requirements for that ratio, if you will, in every property type. We've done a really good job of dialing in real market value. A lot of that's the inventory cleanup. A lot of that's the new tools we have, the models we're using to value properties, and also the analysis that is done by our data analyst, Sean Beaton. I think he's got 35 plus years experience in assessment and tax, and he's really aware of how to work the model for our group to make sure we're collecting the right data, make sure the appraisals are right, and then ultimately they match what the market's doing. So that's what we're hoping for. So again, a tremendous effort has been put out by the appraisal team. I have Susan here today. There are 6-7 others. We have one vacancy, but I want to extend my sincere gratitude to that team for the effort they're putting in to get our county into the position we're now in and heading towards. It wouldn't have happened without all of that legwork. And what we like to say in our office is one team, one dream. So we are collectively pushing that boat, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it finally work and what it was intended to do.
So what's your expectation? Another 1-2 years?
Yeah.
To sort of get that
Yeah.
completed?
Two is what the plan was initially set up
Okay.
for. We're continuing to see that we're overachieving, or we set the bar too low. Someone will decide what that means, but it's moving along at an appropriate clip and maybe even a little better than we thought.
Great.
So, yeah, and all eyes are on our county. Again, other counties are in the same boat. They haven't reappraised in forever. How are we, without adding 4 or 5 bodies, how are we getting to reappraisal? And the staffing model from the Department of Revenue would say we're 4 bodies short right now.
Mhm.
Well, we're doing it with better tools, better models, better workflows. We've gone paperless. Everything's done. Transfers are done digitally. We're not repeating ourselves in terms of data entry. We still have to do some data entry twice because it doesn't get everything, but each year it gets a little better. Appeals. So this is appeal season. If you don't know, property owners who get their tax statement have the ability to appeal their value prior to December 31st. We have 13 appeals right now at BOPTA. 4 of them are for real property. The other 9 are Department of Revenue accounts that we didn't have a say in the appraisal, or the Department of Revenue assigned a fee to the account that we don't have control over. So truly, we have 4 that are of our purview. That's incredible. The market's trending up, so maybe that plays into it. But I forgot to input the numbers there, but in 2012, when I first came on, we were probably 120 appeals. 2015, it was down to 60. 2015, it was 59 appeals in 2015. Now we're down to 4. We're doing a better job of educating property owners on the process. What is real market value? How do we value their property? A lot of folks want to know, why is my tax bill so high? You can't appeal tax. Tax is an equation as a result of valuation. So we've got to walk them back to, let's talk about the real market value and make sure it's correct, because through that is the equation that gets to your tax. You can't lower taxes. That's not something that can be done. But we can look at real market value. And if it has an impact on lowering taxes, that's just part of the tax equation. So having those conversations and being proactive in working with folks who have questions around the appeals time has got our appeals down to essentially a half-day session we've sat through some that were weeks. So again, just another example of some efficiencies and a better program in place than we had years ago. So excited about that. That's the appraisal world. Any questions on appraisal before I move on to tax?
It says there's a couple folks in tax court appeal.
We do have a couple of appeals, yes. So Lowe's has filed appeals statewide on their properties. We happen to have one, so we're in the group. I want to say it's the 4th year. So what's happened is the litigation was initiated years back, and the rest of them that happen after that go into abeyance until we get some decisions on the first ones. So statewide, there's a handful of counties that are trying to get past the first couple of appeals, which will set precedent for the rest. They'll sort of follow suit. Fundamentally, there is a big divergence in the appeal approach for Lowe's specifically. We look at Lowe's as what it is, how it's operating as it sits right now, as of January 1st. Their valuation team believes that we should be looking at it as the structure as if it were vacant and open on the market to be reused as something else. So it's called the dark store theory. It's been litigated all over the United States. There's probably a 60-40 split in states that have upheld the theory and others that have rejected it. Oregon has not tested that all the way through what will ultimately be the Supreme Court. Right now, we're working in the regular division on a couple of counties to get a decision, which will help everyone else sort of solve their outstanding ones. So that is a big one that's statewide. The Farmers Direct appeal is the one I was alluding to back talking about the legislative issue with machinery and equipment. Farmers Direct makes a hay bale compression system where they take baled hay that's already been baled. They compress it down to even smaller so it can be shipped overseas to Japan. That secondary activity of compressing an already created hay bale, in our opinion, is not direct farming related. It's more of how to process something that's already been farmed. Those are the arguments that are being made about when does farming start and stop, because everything that's in conjunction with farming is exempt. Everything not in conjunction is taxable. So that one is all about definitions. And since our appeal started in, I think, 2016, several other counties with the same vendor, the same manufacturer, they're having the same appeals. So again, it's more of a statewide, so much so that it's going through legislation to get it resolved. So I don't see this one going to trial. I think it gets solved via the legislative session.
Okay. What's your ratio with the property tax appeals and what is brought and what actually is changed in some way?
In terms of BOPTA, Well, it's hard when there's four. Most of the time, I would say it has been very rare. I'm trying to think of one instance where what we presented as how we developed our real market value was not upheld by the board. One of the pivotal points in this BOPTA process is the appellant has to come to the board with real market evidence of why they think our number is wrong. And that takes time. You got to do research. You got to look at comparable sales. You got to maybe get in touch with a realtor, see if they'll give you a broker price opinion, something. We try not to have folks incur the cost of a full-blown appraisal. It has happened. Usually at that point, we're agreeing on the same number. So, they kind of realize, oh, well, I got an appraisal and it looks a lot like what they came up with. We're in concert. So very infrequent, upwards of 99% since I've been involved. Now I can't speak to years past, but we do a very thorough job of site review when somebody appeals, working directly with them and hopefully finding a solution. And if we can't, then there's a process and it's totally fine. We expect it. I don't discourage it, but it doesn't happen very often that we're wrong.
That's kind of nice to be able to say, huh?
It's a testament to the tenure of the folks we have on staff. They know what they're doing. They know they're really good at doing appraisal work. And unfortunately, maybe the same skill set's not on the other side of the table, but we're trying to educate them through it. This is why. So,
Thank you.
yes. Okay. On the tax assessment side, so October, if you don't know, this will just be maybe a reminder. If you do, October through December 15th is the major tax collection season. We've taken in over 40,000 payments from various sources. We get them online, in person, through lockbox, through data exchanges. As of Friday of last week, we collected 146 million, or 90% of the 2022-23 taxes. We have a very strong tax base in Yamhill County. We run slightly above the state average, but nowhere close to those that are struggling. We'll have better than a 95% collection by the end of the tax season. And then we'll have better than a 99.5% collection before something actually gets foreclosed on. So, and those are usually properties that maybe Jody could attest to are sometimes intentionally left behind.
Yeah.
They just, the developer leftovers. So working with other jurisdictions in budget season, everyone's looking for what does the forecast look like? What can we expect in additional tax revenue for the year? I model them out for the city of McMinnville, excuse me, Willamina roots coming out there. McMinnville and Newburgh. I also do one for the county. I'm looking at between 4 and 4.25% increase in our base property tax levy for 22-23. So, excuse me, 23-24. So that'll be the bills that go out in October of this year. Looking up, still looking up. The market's slowing in various ways, but prices aren't dropping. Construction's not really dropping off. Did have a conversation with the city of McMinnville that was interesting about 2 years from now that they've subdivided the land that was available in the urban growth and the city limits. They're thinking years 2025 and forward, where do we develop next? I'm thinking January of last year, we're still developing. So depending on who you're talking to and where they're looking at economically, that conversation can change, right? So for us, housing's still up, prices are still up, volume is down. That has to do with the federal interest rates more so than anything, but everything looks good for this coming year. I don't see any issues on the horizon.
It's interesting because anecdotally, we're seeing some of the higher end homes are definitely dropping in value on the market value.
Yeah, it's what's happening is the purchasing power of the consumer is going away because the interest rates have gone so high. If you could afford 550 when it was 2%, and now it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 5.25 or 6%. That same house you can't afford. You either come down in what you're looking for, or the price has to come down to match that consumer. I don't see as much in price drop as I would have expected. I just see longer days on market.
Yeah,
So-
and I mean, this is anecdotal. I'm just saying the kind of product of the higher end home is coming down significantly, but there's not a lot of it. So
Right.
I see that consistency as well.
Sure.
In sort of the mid-level market.
And supply is still up or excuse me, demand is still up and supply is still catching up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's some weird forces in play
Mhm.
there. We'll see what happens. I think if days on market hit 90 days or 180 days, then you're going to see people who really had to move or need to move, bring prices down. But for now, we're seeing sort of just let it, I mean, days on market were under 10 for, almost a year and a half, 2 years. Houses were sold before the little post was put in the front
Right.
yard. People look at that and say, oh, well, it's slowing down. It's slowing down. I think it's returning back to a normal,
Mhm.
90 days on market is normal. 120 days is not even alarming. Outside of that, you start to see pressure on inventory and we'll see what happens. Looking at January 1st of this year, because we're always January 1st, if all that starts to come to the table, maybe later in the year, we start to see some, policy changes and prices start to drop. We won't see that in terms of our tax until November of
Right.
2024.
Right.
So it's kind of, we're lagging by 14 months.
So we're pretty consistently at 95% collection rate. However, we field calls, and I'm sure you do as well, from our elderly population, folks who are aging in place, who are really feeling pinched right now.
Yeah.
Are you noticing more of that in terms of that population specifically?
I can check on that. For me, the indicator of that, or how many people are applying for senior deferral
Mhm.
or the senior programs that we have to help those folks. I haven't looked at those numbers to see if they've upticked. I'm not going to put Roxanne on the spot, but do you have any thoughts on?
I don't know if it's anymore. The Department of Revenue did offer the senior deferral program. They had extended it as long as the property owner paid kind of a late fee. And so we did get, maybe a dozen.
Okay.
20 applications that came in before the December 1st deadline. So
Okay.
We did see some that were reaching out, and we
Mhm.
try to educate them on the different programs that are available and to help them lower.
Okay.
their tax.
We definitely have programs and we guide them to programs that are available.
Sure.
So, I think 5 years from now, what is a tax bill going to look like? And we're also approaching potentially the idea of a downward turn in the market, but yet taxes continue to raise. That's when we get the phone calls like a lot. Wait a minute,
Yeah.
the market's down 20%. My house has dropped 30% in value. How did my taxes go up? Well, that gap between real market value and what you're taxed on is still 40% right now. So sans a significant crash in the market, 3%'s going to happen.
Yeah.
Or legislative
Yeah.
change.
Derek, I'm sure you're aware there's a legislative concept regarding tax exemptions for partial exemptions for disabled vets. That's
Mhm.
been kicked around for many sessions. But this one is something that we approved at legislative committee, which would actually shift the burden of the counties having to take the hit to a tax credit at the state level.
Oh, nice.
And otherwise, it's a non-starter. And then also the whole veterans exemption or
Mhm.
discount has been something we've talked about here for a long time.
Yeah. There is energy around and focus around what we call assessed value exemptions, and changing that to a credit.
Mhm.
There's some constitutional issues with the Oregon Constitution and how they're being administered right now. And they're trying to figure out how we can stay in compliance with that. In my opinion, call it what it is. It's a credit. It's not an exemption. But that vehicle would solve that, right? So if we moved it off of an exemption concept and made it a credit at the state level. Yeah. So I know that's on the agenda. That's not a work team I've been invited to yet. Didn't say yet. It's not a work team that I've been invited to. I might get involved in that one too. Okay.
Commissioner Johnston, I should ask if you have any questions or
I do not.
thanks.
I will want that packet though, when I get back, so I can go over I'd like to talk to Derek about the farming.
Sure.
And what's going through legislature.
The price of this handout is 1 box of donuts.
He already paid you from what
Oh,
I
no,
hear.
We don't pay ahead. We don't pay ahead. This is the tax department. All right. Okay, so I'll move on from there. Let's get into, cartography and GIS, one of the brightest spots for the year for us. Brian Hansberry, our senior cartographer and GIS analyst. And thanks to Ken Friday, Ken Huffer, our budget partners in getting this initiative completed. But we converted from some expired software and we went to the most current version of what Esri uses and what we're now using. What was so instrumental about this is we doubled up. We took and modernized our software that we're using, but in conjunction with that, we created a cloud-based enterprise deployment. And that sounds very technical, but at the end of the day, we had a lot of handoff of manually created data. We would create a data set that was GIS related. We would put it on an FTP site. Somebody would go get it. They would use it for their whatever. Planning would use it for theirs. The COG would use it for theirs. And it was clunky. It was time and labor intensive. It was really ripe for human error. And it was a Band-Aid on a program that really needed some attention. So with Brian's effort and our partners at Esri and COG, we've got this new deployment available. And what it really means is now we can seamlessly exchange data with intra-county, other agencies, stakeholders. We have the ability to just provide what they call a map service or a collaboration, which means we'll plug into what you've got, you plug into what we've got, and data sharing will happen seamlessly and timely. So one of the other issues was, we'd be doing subdivision work in our office, and the planning department needed it 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, a month ago, because they're issuing permits and people are out there building. And we just couldn't close that time gap. So one of the big wins here also is the timeliness of the data sharing, the seamlessness of it, and how we are now current and modern in the most modern application of Esri Arc Pro. So much so, Brian did a presentation at our state conference, attended by the entire state's cartography group, planning groups, GIS departments. It was very well received and celebrated as, wow, we want to get there. How do we get there? What did you do? And then our partners at Esri asked Brian, who has not committed yet, to do a presentation nationally on a national platform to show the connectivity of all these components, a cloud-based enterprise deployment with the newest software and what it can do. So very excited about where he's taking us in that arena. And again, all eyes on Yamhill County to demonstrate how it can be done. We are not different in the problems we're solving. We may have a smaller scale, but we're all sort of cracking the same nut when we're trying to get better at these different things. So that's the update there. So the last thing I have for you here, hopefully I usually burn more time than I'm allotted. I have two things left. Program updates. So we talked about exemptions. We're going to talk a little bit about exemptions and special assessments. And then I want to give you just a quick update on personnel. On the program updates, there's two real functions we're performing. Roxanne is overseeing exemptions, and that includes the veterans programs and other programs that you might think of as a credit, but exemptions in terms of if we have to take assessed value off the roll, then it's going to run through the exemptions programs with Roxanne and some help from even Patty. In 2022, we have worked 100 accounts with exemptions for it was schools, fraternal organizations, and housing authority. Over the last 4 years, we're picking exemption categories and figuring out who's in that program. Should they be in that program? Are they in compliance with that program? And if not, how do we get them in compliance, or how do we get them into the program that's more appropriate? Similar to inventory discrepancies for properties we hadn't visited in 25 years, I don't think exemptions in terms of what we've approved historically have ever been audited. You're finding all sorts of things. But over a 4-year period so far, we're really efforting to get them in compliance, get them cleaned up, or remove them when appropriate. So in 2022, it was school. So it was Linfield, George Fox. Fraternal organizations, is that the lodges?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Elks and for some reason, What's that? American Legion, making sure that they've, that they're current and all their stuff's correct. That was in 2022. So over the last 4 years through these different, through the different annual cycles, Roxanne's looked at about 400 exempt accounts to get them, sort of in compliance. Or at least let them know that they're in an exemption program. Yeah, sometimes you call the third owner and then they go, I'm in what now?
Well, that's what I'm kind of wondering. It looks like, is 200 farm and forest deferrals, is that the total that we have in the county?
No,
Seems
so
kinda
the farm
low.
and forest referrals is a whole different ballgame.
Okay.
That's one paragraph below there, but we have 10,000, maybe
Yeah, I was gonna say.
11,000 accounts in farm or forest. And it's about 6 and 5 with farm being the heavier. But well, it's a good segue. Thank you, Chair Bershauer. We'll segue into the special assessments. So, and we've talked about this over past updates also. We needed to get out and inspect property that we had in deferral for forest or farm or wildlife habitat or whatever special assessment program you were in. Folks have been put into these programs in the 70s and had never been looked at since. And it's not so much that they were now out of compliance, but they've transitioned the property. So we've taken the trees out and planted vineyard, or taken out the vineyard and planted trees, or vice versa, however that comes to be. So I think just as relevant as the audit of exemptions, are these appropriate? Are they current? Are they in compliance? The audit of special assessment and the deferral programs for farm and forest needed to be addressed. So over, again, that same 4 or 5 year period, we've done a lot of work, and we've actually seen every property at this point that's in deferral of those 11,000 we talked about. Now we're still maintaining our way through some of the aftermath. Some of them were clear cut, like you could say egregious. They were not farming, period, or they've been turned into a church parking lot, or they had, whatever. And others just needed a little, hey, this is the program. This is what you're going to need to be in compliance. We don't do hobby farms with pets. We need something more than that. Kind of working through it. If you want to stay in it, this is what it needs to look like. Again, it's education. A lot of folks who don't know just don't know because we haven't been in front of them. We haven't been on their property. They unfortunately, there's a number of cases where they're also surprised that they're in a program they didn't know about. So, because these programs transfer with the land.
Sure.
Right. They should be reevaluated at the transfer of, somebody deeds it over to somebody else. The only one that actually happens on systematically is small tract forest because it has other issues, but we won't go into that.
So how did you distill down to 200? Were they just the most obvious and egregious, or?
Yeah. So like I said, we're still working the fallout of the systematic appraisal, or evaluation of all the accounts. Some of them, it was, you're done. We'll see you the next time around.
Gotcha.
Others, it was, you know what, I'm going to give you 2 years. You're close, but plant a couple more seedlings, fill it in. Or that's, Himalayan blackberry is not a crop. You're going to have to do something else, trellis it or something.
Oh my gosh.
So we gave them some time. So now we're circling back on those that we gave time to try to get their, ship in order. And that's the 200 that we're working on.
Okay.
Plus we have, in addition to the ones we're reviewing from those prior audits, we also get new applications every year. So there's folks that are coming in that are new, folks that are going out because they've been disqualified because they put in a subdivision, or they don't want the potential lien on the property.
Yeah.
Folks are going through a refinance of their property. Banks are lending, doesn't have to be a bank. Lenders typically say, get all these liens off here. To that extent, they may want to come out of all programs just to have a clean title. So it's just working that annually. And what we'll have to do here, similar to the exemption program and similar to the appraisal program, is stay on top of it. Just not get behind again. Because the heavy lift was the initial 3-year cleanup. And now, if we just stay on top of it, we're going to be better served. And, it seems like we're out there really hitting you got to be in compliance, you got to be part of this program. But I want to just emphasize that it's as much education as it is, officiating that you're not in or out of compliance. It's getting people up to speed on the program you're in. Make sure you understand the liability, make sure you understand the requirements. And if you want to move into something else, we'll help you. If you want all the way out, we can tell you what that means. But it needed to be addressed. It was too far, I'll say too far gone.
Okay.
There are some additional audits. So we had 50 applications. It looks like, excuse me, we had 60 accounts that were approved, 50 that were disqualified. 40 accounts were audited for income. The amount of time it takes to monitor the special assessment programs for non-EFU versus EFU is that 80-20 rule, easy. So we spend 80% of our time focused on 20% of the accounts that are in deferral that are in non-EFU. The income requirements, the use requirements, everything around non-EFU is significantly more than EFU. EFU is pretty straightforward. You got to try. You got to make an attempt to make a profit. That's the sideboards. In non-EFU, it's dollars per acre. You got to file annually how much you made. You got to show proof of this, that, and the other. So that's the nature of the beast. That had not been done. We hadn't done income verifications. I can say for 10 or 12, you may know of something longer than that, even because at one point it was on the appraisal team, but it just hasn't been a focus. It's too much work goes into it.
Yeah.
And you get too far behind, you can't stay in front of it. So great things happening there. These programs, these initiatives are starting to hit their end in terms of the initial lift. And now we're going to be working on a sustainability. Can we keep these audits going on some sort of cycle or nature that makes sure we don't get behind? And that's our objective. Questions on that?
Commissioner?
None.
Okay.
Okay. The last piece I have for you here is our personnel. So we had one person, we had one team member leave to pursue another occupation. And we filled that position with a new appraiser, Chad McCutcheon. Chad joined our team in October and will be sitting for the Department of Revenue's appraisal certification exam in March. So he is new to the team. He's been a great addition. He works with all the other appraisers in different ways to expose him to the different sort of processes that everybody has. When you're out in the field, you kind of do things the way you need to do them. So he's out doing that and getting himself ready. We have a active posting right now that went out a week ago almost for an appraiser 3 position. That's a commercial industrial appraiser. We recruited for this position for the better part of 4 years. And we just haven't been successful. I'm hoping this go around will produce something that we can look at, maybe even look at some other duties in addition to this that we could couple into a successful recruitment. It's just tough to compete with other metro counties that have the same licensed positions. As soon as we put ours out, 5 minutes later, Clatsop County put out an appraiser position. We had an appraiser position 3. They had a 2. Their base compensation was higher than our 3. They're going that way. That's just going to happen. There's too much combating going over licensed appraisers because Washington County has 20 openings. Multnomah has a whole truckload. So getting them here is a unique task, and really requires somebody who's looking to be in Yamhill County for some reason. I happen to think there's plenty, but okay, so that's what I have.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Any questions? Commissioner Johnston?
And
Thank you,
Great.
Susan. Thank you.
Thank
Roxanne.
you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Good information.
Thank you for
thank you.
the opportunity. Maybe if we do these more frequent, they won't be as lengthy. I'm open anytime. Come see me, I'll come see you.
Thanks very much.
And here's some extra copies.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so that ends our department update. Item F is our work session, and we have review and discussion of economic development strategic planning discussion. And so what I'm kind of envisioning for this is a pretty high level discussion on what we want to see, the goals, the values, the mission of an economic development department / director. And Ken did share some information dating back to 2017 when the county sort of went through this process with Commissioner, I think that was Commissioner Olson and Primazich. I think so.
Mm.
So it's been a bit, it's been about 5 years. So that was really helpful for me to see. And I think that's a good document for us to sort of go on for this discussion. I don't know that I want to get into the weeds of a job description per se, because that's, it's pretty lengthy, complicated. I just want to make sure that we're on board with the high level sort of direction and vision of this position based on the discussions that we've had, regarding how that process went about 5 years ago in SEDCOR and what SEDCOR has done versus the direction we want to go. So, Ken, do you want to maybe start with an overview of where you're at on this process, and then we can
Sure.
look at some specifics.
So as you mentioned earlier this week, I shared some materials that I wasn't sure if the whole board had seen. Just to help provide a little bit more backstory of how we got to where we're at. One was the GROW plan. That was before my time as being might have been in HR at the time. So that was before my time in administration. So I don't have a ton of familiarity with that whole process and went through. And then in 2007, as the chair mentioned, the board at that time adopted this vision, mission, and values and strategies, which I believe was based on, like any type of plan or outcomes or recommendations that come from the board. If I remember and understand correctly, and Commissioner Starrett could probably share more on that, but looked at some of the GROW or some of the recommendations and really tried to boil it down into specific strategies and areas that the board deemed as priorities. And the reason I wanted to share that, because it was this economic development strategy is what was used to draft the RFP when we went out, and it was based on those discussions to bring in a contractor who was eventually selected was SEDCOR. Sure. And you'll see, I think I shared the RFP as well, and you'll see that this was actually attached to the document. So any of the contractors that were responding to the request for proposals would see, here's the goals. And that's why I was recommending for the board to maybe take a look at this as, as maybe this is due for an update. Maybe it doesn't have to be quite as lengthy, or with a lot of the action items or things. I just thought it might be beneficial to put that together. The other item that I shared is I asked HR staff to pull out, reach out to and do a review with some of the other counties and pulling some other samples of what they have for positions. I shared a couple of those with you. It really varies, I know we hear it all the time at AOC, 36 counties, and you see 36, different counties, 36 different ways of kind of doing things. So there are some items from the ones that we received, it was really the Clackamas County and the Marion County ones that I looked more closely at. Marion County's looks a little bit different because their staffing model for that program is a director and 4 program coordinators. So they have a staff of 5 that's within an economic development program. And, so what I have started doing is looking at going through our typical process when we're drafting any type of job description or considered in a recruitment. I start looking at some of those examples, trying to graph some of what are the basic duties, what are the types of things that they're going to be working on. And then I'll do a review of our existing classifications because, there's a laundry list. And again, I won't go too far into the weeds, and looked at some of the samples and what I have. And sorry, Commissioner Johnston, I did not make an electronic copy, but I'll get you a copy of this as soon as I can. Do you think it's possible that we could scan really quick and send this to me? But this is what I've prepared, and Carolina's going to Thank you, Carolina, very much.
It's coming, Commissioner Johnston.
So what I did is instead of drafting the full job description, because that's again, there's some work I need to do with the HR team on that. As I pulled out, there's really the two most important areas to kind of talk about is really the general statement of duties and then the types of work that they're working on. And you're going to see a pretty extensive list, and a lot of this, a lot of these items are updated to Yamhill County, but kind of following some of the things that they had in the Clackamas County position. So, so that's where I'm at right now. It's still really early. I haven't necessarily, I want to make sure that the job classification has sufficient flexibility that should there be a change in priorities that I'm not kind of pinned in by a job description that we only work this direction, and the old days of adding any other duties that as assigned has really fallen out of favor, and you don't see that a lot in job descriptions these days. We really try to make sure that we accurately provide information what's included in this position, and you'll see some items in there. As this is a new program, I also wanted to have some flexibility that should the staffing model evolve in future years, or if there's contracted services, I want to ensure that whoever's in this position also has some supervisory authority as well. So not just as a program coordinator, but actually a program supervisor. So.
Okay. Well, I think it's probably worth maybe reading through this, but maybe let's start with more of that. You said establishing the mission and the vision. There was a lot of really good things in here already. The one thing that I noticed is that it could probably be simplified a little bit. Because for me, the mission and vision need to be very clear. But then the other piece, that third piece, is accountability. How do we measure success? And really everything else just kind of, sounds nice, but we really want to get to that measured success. I think that was part of the reason why we were moving away from SEDCOR. The other reason was that it was so focused on traded sector that we were sort of missing this holistic, view of the economic vitality of the county. So, as I'm going through this, this statement, and Commissioner Johnston, we're looking at the June of 2017 Yamhill County Economic Development Vision, Mission, Values, and Strategies document. As I was going through that, I really like the mission. I think it's pretty clear: business growth, job retention and creation, enhance the well-being for all individuals and communities. I think that's very clear. The vision's very clear. And I liked the statement on accountability and stewardship. I really don't know that we need the rest of it. I sort of want to boil this down to, let's focus these dollars better. And the strategies are, fairly concise and to the point. One of the things I've noticed in strategy 1, which is retain, expand, and recruit businesses, is there was a goal or objective or outcomes that focused on, building this sort of portfolio of assets, this portfolio of what we have in Yamhill County, which I think is a great first step. Let's see what we have. Let's identify where potential growth could be. And that would be the job of this person, is to go into every community and figure out, what does the plate look like? How is the plate set right now? And how can we move forward? So I really like that particular piece, is establish the portfolio, educate commissioners, educate department heads on what that looks like, because it should be intertwined with everything that we do in the county. And then the strategy 2, identify and commit resources that will invest in Yamhill County. I mean, these 2 strategies for me clearly identify the objectives that I would like to see for this particular program manager. You know, discussing options for investing video lottery funds. We have specific funds that can be dedicated to economic development. And at least since I've been here, those have been more focused on, that discussion's been more focused on like, you know, ARPA and these grants and things that came out of COVID. So it's been an unusual time for this. But yeah, I really like what's in here. I think we could simplify it a bit. But again, maybe adding that piece of how we measure success. You know, is it that our economic development director plans to come before the board once a month and give us an update? Is it, hey, you know, 5 businesses have expanded in this past quarter. We have, you know, 5 new businesses across the county in this quarter. What's the measurement of success? So that's the piece I'm unsure of how to define, but I think education is a big part of that. So Commissioner's thoughts on this particular document, Commissioner Johnston?
Yeah, so I think another thing that I'd like to see added into this, I agree with the simplification, but we need to address one of the biggest hurdles before we can even keep attracting businesses in or growth, and that's going to be our appropriate zonings for businesses and make sure we have adequate supply of that. So I don't know if that needs to be included into this or something else along the line, but I think that's important that we have that. And I haven't physically seen it, but I've heard that we do lack an industrial kind of in our county lands. And I think there's going to be a few things coming down the pipe that's going to make that even worse, because I know like Tri-County area, they're going to implement some death fluid restrictions on diesel engines, which means we're going to start having our contractors looking for places to park their equipment. And ideally, it's going to probably end up being industrial, probably in the outskirts of the county. So I see that being probably a huge thing that needs to be addressed. And if we can do it from the county end of it versus each individual person coming to us for a rezoning or whatever, it might be better that we address it from our end than individually.
Yeah, that's a great point. And SEDCOR did do some of that assessment where, they looked at industrial land availability. But I think I could see that as part of that sort of initial portfolio task, right? What do we have? What do we need? What are we going to need in 10, 20 years? And that would be part of that initial assessment that this person would do. And then we can sort of build from there in terms of what the deliverables are. Commissioner Starrett, any thoughts?
Yes, Chair. A couple of thoughts. A couple of things here regarding the industrial land inventory. I know the state has quite a robust database, but it needs to be updated. It needs to be county specific. And the other thing is I would say is that I would like to move away from the either or traded sector or small business, Main Street business. I think it's a fusion of that and tourism. So I think when you're talking about economic development, nothing is off the table if it's going to bring income, jobs, and any kind of economic development to the county, or be able to employ our residents. The other thing is I like the concept of this position being a clearinghouse for information exchange. It's usually really kind of hard when people come to us, and it's usually the businesses. And I remember during COVID, there were a lot of small businesses that came to the commissioners really struggling with the fact that they were just told they have to close their businesses. What do I do? What are my options? Looking for information that it was very difficult. And I see this position as being able to address the small businesses as well as recruiting and retaining businesses that might be traded sector. The other thing is when we look at the grants, the grant programs we had in the past, when we were administering these on our own prior to SEDCOR, there was not that accountability piece where we had the bandwidth to check back and see, how did these grants pan out? I know there were some very, disappointing, that there were some that looked really promising because they had contracts with national chains, and then come to find out that they not stayed in business. So we need to follow up on what's successful and look at those grants more closely in terms of what's the deliverable. Also, in terms of retaining businesses, be able to reach out to the existing businesses and not only just focusing on recruitment. So the knowledge of the regional, state, and local partnerships that you can have not only with chambers, but also some of the other regulatory developments, the federal and state, to be able to be on top of that and to have touch points with a variety of different things. I liked how, I believe it was Clackamas County that had that piece about the fair.
Yeah, and I have a feeling that there's a different relationship than what we have set up, because I know we talked about that briefly yesterday when you and I had met, and the more I thought about it, I think before I would put anything in there about the fair, that we'd probably need to have a discussion with the
Okay.
fair board. And just because of that, for those who don't know that relationship, that the staff at the fairgrounds or the fair board staff actually has authority over the fairgrounds, and we own the property. So I would want to make sure that I would have a conversation at least with Gary and the chair of the fair board.
Sure, and maybe not have that as part of in other words, any kind of oversight, but be able
Right.
to work with them in terms of the economic development component of that piece, because the fair is a huge,
Well, and that would happen whoever, because you'll see in some of the drafting that managing our Fund 26, which is our economic development funds. And we do have allocations each year that the budget committee has approved, going to fairgrounds and parks. And so I do see that connection to where whoever's in this position would be working with both those departments, both fairgrounds and parks, because each year we ask them to report back on what they're using the funds for and some of those drivers and what they're seeing as far as visitation and use and everything. So that would be an important role that this person, whoever's hired and doing this, would continue to have those interactions. And I actually wrote in here, you'll see that, an expectation that working both internally, working with all the various departments as well, because I mean, almost every department, whether it's helping to navigate, permits or making connections with the planning, if a business, this is intended to be to provide that connection, both for connecting private with public, but then also public with private. So I did write that. You'll see that in as one of the bullet items in the.
yeah, that was a good
Right.
catch. Thank you for this.
The other piece is kind of that kitchen cabinet of support for this person. We had EDAC. Honestly, I don't know that I could name every person on EDAC. I would like I would like to see that kitchen cabinet be really a representative from each city. And perhaps for the cities, most cities don't have this infrastructure. They don't have economic development people. They don't have tourism folks. So having the cities brought into sort of this kitchen cabinet of economic development directly with the county. And then, folks like Visit McMinnville or whoever, the folks who are doing more of the tourism-based economy as well. So that's high level in terms of vision and goals for this, but I do want to make sure that that's part of it. And that team is very visible to us.
So as just kind of a suggestion, one item is if the board is interested in doing an update to this, if commissioners wanted to take some time and review it, and then if there's things you'd like to have added or struck, and you could send it to me, and then I could take that draft input and then bring that forward maybe as early as next week or possibly the following week, depends on how quickly. And then the board could review that at that time and have a discussion. I know sometimes it's really challenging to kind of go through a document like this and trying to highlight or find what you'd like to see changed. But if you would like to take a run through on doing an updated strategic plan along these lines, I could take those updates and then we could come back, and then the board would be able to see all the input, the additions, what's been proposed to be struck, and then you could take action on that.
Just from my own perspective of some of these strategic plans that we've done over the years in various organizations, nonprofits, at the county, I think sometimes we spend an inordinate amount of time on strategic plans that really never wind up becoming part of our discussion going forward. So I just want to make sure we don't wind up with another one of these where we're spending weeks on this, we're going over it, I would like to spend more time on the job description. So in other words, maybe getting some thoughts on this, but as far as dragging this out to where we have weeks on this, I don't know.
No, and maybe I misspoke, because what I was saying is the board could continue to work on this if in reviewing what I have for general duties and some of the work that's in here, because you're going to see it's not going to get into real specifics, because again, it needs to be able to adapt to the board's priorities.
Mhm.
But if you're comfortable with that, I can still proceed in parallel with finalizing the job description and going through the recruitment process. And I'll just say that, having facilitated many recruitments over the years, a lot of times, and especially with something that is a change, that we're going from contract and now we're standing up more of an internal program. The first thing that any applicant's going to do is like, well, what's the strategy? What am I going to be working on? What's the long-term goals? Is this something that I see that aligns with my priorities? And so there is some value in having this. So I have it when I'm raised the question, when I'm, do you have any questions for us? Okay, what's the board strategies moving forward? What are the types of projects I'm going to be working on? This helps address that, if that makes sense, as we go through a recruitment process. So what I was proposing is not necessarily a prolonged, that's completely up to the board. But I also, if you wanted to take some time, do a review, submit that, we can put it on the calendar. I can come back, but I'm also going to be working in parallel on the job description, and, because, I want to get the position filled.
Okay, great. Thank you. That makes sense.
Yes, I think this is a good place to start. I have made a bunch of notes I can send you in terms of maybe places we trim and redefine. But I think this is, we don't have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. So we'll send those over.
And I'll find a Word version of the document.
Okay.
So maybe it's a little bit easier. So if each commissioner, if you have changes and you want to use track changes, or if you just want to make notes or make it a little easier to edit. And so then that way I can kind of track. So when I come back, it's kind of clear, well, who made this change and
Okay.
what was this? And
Okay.
And then in terms of that, the kitchen cabinet that I referred to, I don't know that we necessarily have to spell out anything specific about that will be decided by this individual. And we can have that discussion with them, but anything about this individual in terms of qualifications specifically, I know some of them seem obvious, but maybe we should make sure that we state them. Like, do we want them to reside in Yamhill County? I would prefer somebody reside here. Stuff like that. You've managed people before.
that's a hard one.
Okay.
I'll because typically we have not had a residency requirement for positions, and that can present some challenges. So as far as some of the requirements, because like I said, I'm also trying to make sure that it's consistent with existing classifications that we have within, so I can figure
Okay.
out the compensation, and there's a whole exercise that we go through with human resources in determining the qualifications, the classification, the requirements for the position. I'm thinking like the knowledge, skills, and abilities down to the special requirements. I could put some thought into that residency requirement within the county, but I do know one downside is I wouldn't necessarily want to exclude a really highly qualified applicant
Who might
because they live
relocate.
in Salem or something in
Okay.
that circumstance. Because that would limit the pool of applicants, and I want to make sure that we're hiring the best person for the position. And then the second part is I do know that there's some challenges around having some of those residency requirements as well. So,
Okay.
But if we could have have wording, and I think there's something in here, one of the job descriptions maybe was our RFP initially, was to have a working knowledge or a familiarity with the county, the community, the businesses. So that would sort of tend to limit it without limiting it, so that somebody is conversant with not coming from, somewhere else and not having a clue about what the culture and the businesses and the.
where I would see something like that coming in is you go through a recruitment process, and if you have an applicant who comes in that checks all those boxes, that gives them more of a step up or
Okay.
more of an advantage, or it has those skills that we're looking for. It wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't want to exclude because someone's not local, because they might be checking all the other boxes in other
Sure.
areas. So it's,
Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm seeing in some of these it says reside in or willing to relocate to city or county is desired but not required.
Mhm.
I just wanted to talk about it because I don't want to get a list of people who are from Texas and Arizona and this and that, and we're kind of going, okay,
well, if they did, they'd be obviously people looking to relocate.
looking to relocate would be
Right.
great, but even
Right.
somebody from Vancouver, is that person really connected to Yamhill County?
Mhm.
Meh, so.
Okay. Bless
Um,
you.
Any other concerns over maybe some quote unquote requirements for this person that we should address? I think it doesn't need to be stated, but public speaking, all of those sort of leadership qualities would be an expectation.
Yeah, and like I said, I have a more detailed draft that I'm working on,
Okay.
because again, what I'm sharing is really just two sections, which is the statement of duties and then a general statement more specific to the duties that they'd be expected to perform or may perform. I didn't include all of the skills, abilities, and knowledge that we're going to be looking for and the special requirements, because again, a lot of that's driven by the classification.
Okay.
But some of those items would naturally fall in there because there is the in here about providing updates, making presentations, attending, so we would, being able to, we would have requirements around need to be able strong in presentation,
right.
strong writing skills,
Yeah.
ability to understand the various state programs, grant
Mhm.
programs, exemption programs, a lot of things that's really specific to business and working with Business Oregon, working with outside organizations like SEDCOR and COG and Willamette Workforce Partnership and the laundry list of the chambers and so on. All that is going to be in here generally, and then those are going to be skills and experience that we're going to be looking for the successful applicant.
Okay, great. So as
Okay.
far as posting,
Mhm.
to have this posted by the last day of February, so we can start,
Mhm.
applicants can start rolling in. The highly qualified applicants can start rolling in.
I'm pretty close to wrapping this up. If there's And so I'm not hearing a lot of concern. I know you're looking, there's a lot to read here, but I'm gonna move as quickly as I can to get this posted and start the recruitment.
I think this captures sort of the best of all the information we've gotten. So, yeah, I mean, I don't see anything in here. I don't see anything that's not in here of what I think would be important.
Okay, so
Sure.
post by March 1.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna post with, because I'm also looking at, once I finalize this and HR needs to do their review of the posting, then once I don't even know what day of the week it is right now. So,
It's Thursday.
yeah. It's the 9th. I'll try my best to see if we can get this open before the end of the month.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
So what you need from us though is notes and revisions to the mission, vision, this document.
But
Yeah.
not now necessarily.
Not necessarily now.
necessarily,
I'm
but-
gonna proceed with the recruitment, but it would be helpful to have
Okay.
that.
To attach to that, yeah.
Correct.
So, commissioners, if we can get our thoughts in, I would say, by next week's meeting at the very latest.
Mhm.
I know Kit, you've got some time constraints, but, if that works.
My biggest concern is number 8, and my biggest concern is covered by number 8. So I'm pretty good. I mean, I'll go through it again, make sure if there's something I want to add, but I want to make sure we have the land and the zonings that are correct to be able to proceed. So.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, that's,
And that number 8 pretty much gives them broad, they're not going to be able to do that, but they're going to be able to assess what we need. And then we get with Ken Friday, and then whatever the process is from there to, if we need to do a little bit of rezoning here and there. But whoever we're onboarding is going to know, going to have some expertise on area of doing that along with Ken. So.
great.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so we will have our edits to you by next Thursday at the latest, and then we should be good to go for moving forward. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Ken, for
Yeah,
that.
appreciate that. Let's see. Oops. Okay. That ends our work session for today. Item G is consent agenda. And we have some minutes and we have a committee reappointment. Commissioners, I am going to request that we pull item G2 and just move it to later on when when Travis can sort of compile all of these Parks and Rec board applications and maybe come to us with a complete package of folks, because there's quite a few vacancies right now. I think we're up to 7. There was another resignation this week. So, and he has a slew of interviews scheduled for, I want to say it's the 22nd if memory serves. So I would rather him just go through that process and then we can look at a package of folks and get this board back up and running. And it's really critical in my mind because we last year approved quite a large sum of money for the master plan for our county park system. And it's very hard to get that rolling when you have kind of a skeleton board. So I'd like to look at that a little bit more holistically and get a great strong group of folks in there so they can dive right into that process. So I'm going to move that we approve item G1 and then postpone at item G2. Any further discussion? Okay, All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. And I'm gonna, well, I don't want to put a date on it because I'm not sure what his schedule is. So I'll just maybe Commissioner Johnston, if you can work with Travis and just see kind of what his schedule is for presenting those, we can get it on at that point.
I will. And I know we don't want to delay too long because I know they're trying to still come up with, there's some parks programs that they want to implement for this year that they did last year. And one of them was the puzzle. You go around to different parks and find letters and fill in the puzzle. I don't know if that affects this or not, but I'll get with Travis and make sure we can keep moving. forward
Okay.
on that.
Well, if his interviews are on the 22nd and if he can crank out a list for us quickly, we can look at it on the 23rd. I don't see how that would be a problem. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just a reminder on process, because it's really the Parks Board will review the applications and then provide a recommendation. The only concern that I would have is if they're having quorum issues
Right.
and not able to make a recommendation. And I was just really quickly looking because I wanted to see when Mr. Doerfield, when his term expires, it looks like it expires in March.
Well, I think in that instance, if they can't reach a quorum, then the commissioners make the decision, right? And it's quite possible they don't, because I don't think they have a current quorum. So let's maybe double check on that and, we
Well,
can,
A quorum, if I remember correctly in the bylaws, because I know they have a minimum number for the board, but really the quorum is, ensuring a majority of the current board is present for the meeting in order for them to do a meeting. So,
Okay.
Yeah,
well, in lieu of that, and because Travis is going to interview these folks, so, if he can make a recommendation as the department head, we can respond.
yeah. I usually don't have staff involved with making recommendations. It's really, there's some limited recommendations, but I don't. If for whatever reason there's not a quorum or the Parks Board wouldn't act, is not able to provide a recommendation, I would probably, and the Board of Commissioners need to take action on that. I would probably recommend that I would work with Travis and we would help facilitate what those interviews and selection process would look like for the board without necessarily having staff and potentially the awkward situation of providing a recommendation of one citizen applicant over another.
Well, but we don't necessarily have to do interviews. We can simply choose individuals. We've done that before.
Can't we do that based on the applications? In other words, the board can take a look at the applications.
There's no requirement to do interviews, so it's completely
Yeah,
up to the
right.
board.
And look at the applications and make decisions there, because I think we've looked at applications in the past for a variety of different things. So
Mhm.
I would just want to know who the applicants are.
Okay.
But historically, and I think it's stated in most of the bylaws, admittedly, I don't have the Parks Board bylaws in front of me, but one of the expectations to those committees is to be able to fill vacancies and provide recommendations to the Board of Commissioners to consider. And so hopefully they'll have a quorum, they'll be able to review the applications or go through their process and prepare recommendations that Travis can then bring forward to the board.
Okay. Well, let's kind of have in our mind that, the 23rd might be something where, we need to add that at a relatively last minute, in the event that they don't have quorum, just to make sure that he's covered and he can move forward. Okay, so let's see, we're moving on to item H, old business. Item H1 is consideration of approval of a board order in the matter of adopting the Yamhill County tax foreclosed property management and disposition policy. And this was continued from February 2nd, 2023. And I had a couple questions. So in the sort of list of priorities, we mentioned broadband service. Is that just kind of a random thing, or has that been in there for a long time for a purpose?
I don't, so that's from statute. I
Okay.
don't know when that one got passed. It is sort of random. Let me look.
I think it was page 7 that I saw that.
I'm trying to see if I can look up the statute real quick.
Or not. I mean, I don't have an issue with it. I'm just curious why that's
Why it's a thing.
in
Yeah.
there.
I don't know why it came to be, but I think it was out of that list of priorities. It's essentially a direct translation from statute. And I think the broadband thing was, I'm guessing, came of age when the internet sort of took off. And so they wanted to encourage local governments to encourage broadband providers to move in.
Okay.
So
the change from, because I think the original version had
yes.
had returned to property owner number 2, and I was asking that we have that as our first priority.
Yeah, so the original version prior to the last board meeting had number 1 was retained for county use and number 2 was sale to former owner. And we switched that before the last board meeting, but yes, it did get switched.
Okay.
So sale to former owner is first.
Mhm.
Okay.
Sure. So
And just to clarify, so because not everyone knows what we're reading, if they're not following along in the packet, we're talking about the priority and go ahead.
yeah, so kid, if you want to follow along, it's section 3.01, page 6. So the order of priority, and this is just preferred priority, doesn't mean that the board can do as it wishes with its property. It's just sort of to set policy for staff. Number 1 is sale to former owner, if requested and qualified. Retention by the county for ongoing county use is number 2. Number 3 is transfer to a government body, local municipality, or qualifying nonprofit for the purpose of, let's see here, providing, and I have to skip down here. Yeah, it's called a permissible purpose, and that's defined in the code, and I can go into that if you want me to, but
That's where it remains in public use for 20 years and.
yeah,
Okay.
or a nonprofit for low-income housing is one.
Social benefits.
Social benefit
nonprofit.
stuff. I think there's
right.
a child, there's a child one for daycare services. I don't remember it specifically, but those kinds of things. Yeah, social services. Transfer to any nonprofit, local municipality, or private corporation for the purpose of providing broadband services. That's number 4. 5 is sale by private sale, and 6 is sale at a public auction. And obviously, we can only do a private sale if the property is under $15,000 and non-buildable.
Okay.
Okay. I must have the first version because mine says
Yeah.
donate.
I do too.
I like transfer better because we didn't
Yes.
donate necessarily in Lafayette. We transferred.
Yes, yes, I
like that
changed
better.
that term too. I changed it from donation to transfer.
Okay.
Yes, I forgot that. Yeah.
So now that I know I have an older version, this might not be accurate, but on page 9,
Mm-hmm.
number G or letter G, that seems like a very specific formula and process. Is that new? Because I don't know that we've been doing that.
That, I think I stole that. Who did I take that from? I don't remember. I took it from another county and it was an addition that was added after our last auction.
Okay.
Because to the draft after our last auction, because honestly, we had a bunch of people in the room who wanted the property, but wanted to wait. I guess take the chance that nobody would buy it so that then they could offer a lower price.
Mhm.
And this is apparently that's pretty common. And so this is intended to sort of nip that in the bud. But you know, if the board doesn't really want to get that deep into the details, that's fine. It was really just, we had numerous people at the auction, sat through the auction, and then came back the next week or so with a minimum bid, which is 15% of whatever it was that we asked at auction, which is
Okay.
already 50% of real market value.
Right.
Or we ended up with an auction occurring outside of the actual auction with some of
Yeah.
the bids and counter bids.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like the policy, especially if it solves that. I was just thinking, gosh, is that easy to manage? I mean, we don't have very many of these properties, but is that easy to manage for you guys?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
yeah, it's just math.
Okay.
Noelle's good at tracking this stuff. so.
We've been keeping her busy lately with this
Oh,
stuff.
yes. Bless her heart.
Okay, Commissioner Johnston, any thoughts, questions?
I do. So on the property inspection form, have we done this before? Or is this brand new?
This is a new thing. So if you
Okay.
want to totally, yeah.
Yeah, so I like it. Are we, or is this internally within county and county staff that see this, or does this get posted when the property's up for sale? Is number one question.
This is just internal communication. So,
Okay.
yeah, so Jason, our surveyor, is actually going to be the one who fills out the form, and then he's going to give it to our office so that we can start doing what has to be done to either clean it up, remove occupants, stuff like that. So it's
Okay.
just a way to communicate.
So I like how it has buildable lot, yes or no, confirmed by planning, yes or no. Probably a couple other things that I'd like to see added to that would be, which is what I went through with the Hebo property, is just a quick search, title search on it to see if there's any easements.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Kind of almost like you have the buildable lot. Is there an easement, yes or no, confirmed by somebody, you know?
Yeah.
And I guess, and kind of maybe one sidebar to the easement be if when Jason does like a visual inspection, if there's actual, so easement on paper, but actual physical easement to the property. So like Hebo had an easement, but there was no physical, road going to the property.
See the staff table.
Come on up. Jason's here.
We've got Jason here, so.
So but
Morning.
there was a document that was an easement for Hebo. Am I wrong? Or was it, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, but it probably wasn't, not that I saw originally. So I got it from the title company that it had an easement.
Okay, so you're saying we should go collect that document?
Yeah, have all the information. Yep.
Okay.
Or the easy information anyway.
Gotcha. Okay.
And we're already doing on-site. So once we do have, whether we know that there is an easement or not to the property, to see now on site if there's an actual physical road or improvement of that easement going to the property. And the only reason I'm bringing all this up is just because I went through for the Hebo property, and I think it's fairly easy stuff to do. We're already out there. The easement on paper is just a phone call. And I guess I'd even maybe want to take it one step further, and I'm not sure how this works, but if we call a title company and just do a flat out title report on the property.
And I think, correct us if I'm wrong, Jason, I think tax does a title report on all of their tax foreclosed properties. So that is being done. We just need to get better at having them send that to our office. I don't even know. Are easements always included on title reports?
If they're not, if there's some special product that the assessor requests from the title company, we can make a request for something that would be more along the lines of a title abstract that would show these items. And I think that's the logical place to make it happen, is that report. And Jody, as you've indicated, we should look to the assessor now and grab that product when they get it as part of their work and use that in our packets.
And that's a communication that we'll have with them. It might be that, I'm not entirely sure. I think they use the title report to, in the event that there's a lacking legal description, but so they might not even think about how we would need it. So it's on us. We need to reach out to them.
Would it be advisable for us to organize the title in for the assessor? I mean, if we're gonna be concerned with title matters, which I think can be very complex at times. If we're gonna concern ourselves with that, should we?
Our office runs the title, is what you're thinking.
So, yeah, so we would organize that and find those things out up front.
I say yes. I would have to run that past Christian. But I think that's a good idea. I think we'll probably use the title report. Well, I don't want to say more than tax because I don't honestly know what all they use it for, but we would use it extensively. So yeah, that's worth talking to tax about for sure.
So Commissioner Johnston, you're wanting to add this component to the sort of the inspection form checklist?
Yeah, at a minimum, I think kind of like they have the billable lot, yes or no. Is there an easement? Yes or no? And maybe one more subsection to that kind of yes or no checkbox would be, is there a physical easement? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Jason or somebody goes out physically and looks at these properties and then they can confirm whether there's an easement there or not.
Well, and Jason can read a map better than the rest of us.
Yes. Well, and he's the one I went to on the Hebo one, and I'm like, hey, here's a bunch of numbers on an exhibit. Can you draw that on the map? And yep, it's right here. Okay, cool.
So as simple as that issue sounds, when it comes to property rights, they can really kind of spider web, and where we might find some evidence of an easement, that easement might not necessarily apply directly to that property. And the issues they're more than face value issues. So that's where the value of the title report comes in. We rely on that title report uniformly as our source. I think that would put us in the position of having the best available information.
What else?
A physical inspection will show physical ingress and egress. But that doesn't always mean ingress and egress. So the title report would be the controlling document. And as Commissioner Johnston suggested, maybe that is a good checklist item.
I like it.
For us.
I can't imagine Christian would object. I'll check with tax. The other thing it'll show is the title report will show us any potential liens, which that's a whole other discussion. But that is something that's tripped us up on a couple properties. So that would be beneficial.
Okay.
So what I
That's all
can
I have.
is, I mean, we can just kick this out another week. That's fine. Or I can come back with an updated version of just the exhibit and you can adopt that post today. It's up to
Post
you.
ordinance?
Well. You
Yeah.
could, is this an ordinance?
No, this is just a board order.
It's a board order.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
the board could technically take and include in the motion the changes that are requested for those specific areas
you
in
could
the
do that.
motion, and we can make the change and then.
Yeah, you could do that. That's even better.
You're welcome.
Cut his mic.
Okay, and so in terms of the sealed bid process now, we are going
Yes.
to,
So, I originally changed it so that we were gonna bring the bids and open them in front of you.
Mhm.
But I changed it back because, and that was after we got a couple of bids this week. or last week, that weren't high enough. And so I don't want to waste the board's time. We got a bid for $35. And so we'll open them, reject the ones that are low, and then we'll bring the ones that are not low to the board, and you can decide at that point. But we do have a cutoff date. All bids received by noon on Friday will be presented at the next board meeting.
Okay.
And then that's just a rolling thing. So if we get a bid on a property Friday at noon, and then a bid on Monday for that same property, that Monday bid is going to have to go on next week's agenda. That's just the way we're going to have to do it. Hopefully that doesn't happen often. It's happened twice to us, which is, I've never seen it in all the time I've been an attorney, so that was a surprise. But, you know, that was the only way we could sort of do the fairness thing is, you know, if you find out that there's a bid coming up on property that you want, you better get it in before Friday at noon. Yeah.
So it comes in Friday by noon. It's open to make sure that it's at least
Yeah.
reasonable. Goes before the board on the following Thursday. Are we, you know, if another one comes in on Monday morning, are we notified of that, or are we just sort of doing what's in front of us and we can decide whether or not that's good or not? And
I mean, I will always err on the side of more information than less.
Okay.
What I would probably do is say, we got another bid on Monday, but we can't present it until next week. So at the discretion of the board, we can kick this out a week.
Sure.
Would be sort of what I would say day of, if that happened.
Okay.
And you guys could decide, oh, we're happy with this bid. We're gonna
Okay.
go forward, or let's see what else we got.
So if you're putting a noon Friday deadline,
Rolling, yeah.
but we're tasked with highest or best, so does that deadline not mean anything?
I think that's the hard part,
Yeah.
because I know we've talked about this and the struggle that someone turns in a sealed bid that we've now opened. We put that in the packet, people know
right.
that, and then we get a competitive bid on Monday. And it does prolong,
You could just keep going and going.
you end up back in an auction period. It almost seems like that if there was a way that we'll entertain a bid, if no further bids are received, you know, we can proceed with the consideration. But if it ends up getting multiple, you know, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds and on the process, but then the other thought would be, you get a bid, it's on the agenda for next Thursday, you end up getting another bid on Tuesday, and it looks like now we're going down the auction path. Maybe it should just go back to some type of a separate auction process or something, a way to, if there's interest, multiple interest is going back, and then
I can also pull a bid, and see, and then I get back into the, is that fair to the original bidder?
Well,
pull a
when we
bid
were
from the
doing
agenda.
when we were looking at sealed bids open to here,
Yeah,
was the deadline different? Was it up to,
like, they could submit it all the way up until the board meeting,
right?
until you guys make a decision, which they still can. Nothing that is going to prevent them from showing up the day of the board meeting and say, you know, I would actually like to offer a higher bid. It's sort of the nature of the beast.
and maybe it won't happen that frequently. But
And I think that section that I added in after that we talked about, the 90% and then drop it down 10%, that'll help with that too. Because right now they bottomed out at 15% and they're going up from there. So on some of these properties, 15% of not even real market value, it's 15% of half real market value is
Yeah.
very low. So
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of interest.
And so the other part is just kind of circling back and, because this isn't an ordinance, this is a policy that the board could act on, you know, and if approved, and if we start finding that there's issues coming up with the implementation of the you know, that's when we'd be coming back to the board and saying, oh, it looks like we need to make some amendments or adjustments to that policy. So,
Yeah. Okay. I don't know, so I know you're concerned about not wasting time with $35 bids, but
If you, yeah.
I mean, if
can
that's
certainly bring them.
technically easier to do and more fair, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Because it's just a matter of a couple minutes saying, okay, well, that doesn't work.
That's fine by me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So bringing the sealed bids.
So I'll get it on the agenda as soon as I can, and then we'll just keep taking bids and as many as we get up until board hearing at 10 a.m. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine by me.
Commissioner Johnston, does that sound a bit
Yep,
easier?
that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
So I'm gonna make a motion.
You could make a motion and direct staff to make a motion and staff will make the changes as discussed today and.
Okay, so I move to approve the matter of adopting the Yamaha County Tax Foreclosed Property Management and Disposition Policy. And direct staff to make the changes that we have discussed today regarding the inspection form and the process for sealed bids.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I have them all. So title report, easement checklist. Did I miss one, Kit?
Physical easement is this kind of a
Physical
subset?
versus, okay.
Title report and easement. Yep.
And okay. And then change the sealed bid process. Okay. Were there others? Is that all of them?
Okay, that was it. Okay, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, man.
Just here he comes. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, sorry about that. We were just in the
I'm
middle,
here.
we were in the middle of voting, so I have a motion to approve the policy with the changes that we've made or proposed. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Hi.
Got it.
All those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Board order passes.
Thank you, Jason.
We lost it.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, H2. Consideration of approval of a board order in the matter of adopting the Yamaha County Discrimination and Harassment Policy. This was continued from February 2nd of 2023. And commissioners, I had just some questions for Jody about the policy, because I know it's very difficult to have sort of an employment policy that governs everybody when some people, like elected officials, are not technically employees. So I had a set of questions I asked about that in terms of, can you clarify, are we employees? How would we be treated if something comes forward? Is there disciplinary action that applies to us? And the answer is pretty much no. So I made some phone calls to some commissioners in other counties and asked what they do. And some of them have kind of a code of conduct, if you will, for elected officials that they work on with their other elected officials, not just the commissioners. We could have one that's only ours. But that sort of governs all of those things. There's some good governance pieces to it. There's, some transparency pieces, and then there's sort of this code of conduct, how we expect each other to behave in the workplace, outside of the workplace, that kind of thing. So my proposal is that we just remove the elected officials from the policy I know we need a harassment policy. It hasn't been updated for a while, but I think it's problematic if you start putting people in there that really don't, the policy can't apply to. And instead take up, take up the effort of putting together something that does apply to commissioners.
So the code of, what is the, what are the consequences? What are the P regarding breaking that code of conduct?
Well, it's not disciplinary in the sense of like you can be punished or terminated, but that we definitely have abilities to censure. We've done that in the past, unfortunately, with other elected officials. So
Yeah, in terms of the county's ability to discipline, quote unquote, is limited to a censure is essentially all the board has the ability to do.
Which can be done now without a policy.
Mhm.
I mean, there is a policy at the state legislature, an actual bona fide, step by step how that's done. But
Yep.
my understanding is that you could vote to censure someone even now that does not require another policy code of conduct. Because, again, I go back to a lot of times these things just become, something that sits on a shelf and really doesn't have any, I mean, if we have to get to the point where we're outlining, how to do things right, I don't know. Maybe I just haven't seen an example of one, but censuring is something we could do right now. If we, for instance, if we had a commissioner who wasn't coming to work or was coming to work impaired, I mean, those are things that can happen.
yeah, and I'm kind of thinking of taking it as Commissioner Johnson smiling. I'm thinking of taking it a step further and, addressing some of those good governance issues like transparency around our expenditure accounts, our reimbursement ability. What does that look like at the end of the year? Being accountable to each other. Setting sort of a level of expectation that if you're traveling, you're not traveling first class and you're not going to Ruth's Chris and you're not taking limos everywhere, right? That kind of exorbitant expenditures, those kinds of things. So I have a list that I've sort of been developing in the past 2 years, but I think that might fall into that very well because there really is no enforcement mechanism. We're not considered employees, but I do think it's important to have some type of standard. Maybe we start with commissioners. We'd have to bring in all of the other folks in the county who are elected if we want to go beyond that. But that's kind of what I was thinking. We do have that power now to censure. So.
And to your point about that, I remember several years ago asking the board if they would be interested in having more oversight or accountability regarding expense accounts and discretionary money that's being given to commissioners. There was no interest at the time, but I think it would be definitely an ethical thing to do.
Sure.
So actually to memorialize something like that, because if you look at the commissioners don't necessarily have a policy whereby, in terms of travel. So for instance, Health and Human Services has a policy where if they're going to a conference in Portland and the conference is over at 6 and they're supposed to be back there at 8, there's no provision for them to spend the night. But commissioners, if they've got a meeting in Salem, not that we have done that, but if it's easier, to spend the night, it's happened when you've had a 25-minute drive, mileage and expenses and meals and things like that, where it's like the commissioners, it's sort of been whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, we're kind of going down that rabbit hole, but that would be my motion is to adopt the board order with the the revision of removing elected officials.
And also, I think to make sure, because this is a personnel policy, I think if the effective date would be 14 days after. I can't remember if that was in the memo, but it's not stated in here. I'd like to have the effective date be 14 days upon approval. Because we have some notification requirements that we have to do per the collective bargaining agreements to make sure that it's posted and give the opportunity, the union opportunity to review the policies as well.
Yeah, it was changed in the board order.
It was,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
I didn't see it on the,
So is it 14 days from today?
From passage, yeah.
yes.
Okay, so it does need to be changed to the 23rd. At least the copy I have in front of me.
Yeah, I'll work with Carolina.
Okay.
We'll make sure the minutes reflect that.
Um. Okay, Commissioner Johnston, any thoughts, concerns?
No.
Okay, I don't know if I made a formal motion, but I moved to approve the matter of adopting the Yamhill County discrimination and harassment policy with the vision of removing elected officials is this specific term from the entirety of the policy. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes, and we will make sure that that's changed to take effect on February 23rd of 2023.
One quick question. Do you want me to draft up this rules of code of conduct thing, or what do
Yeah,
you want me to go forward with that?
I was gonna, ask Christian if that's something that
Okay.
I can work with you on, and
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I just pulled up Marion County has something similar, so
Yeah.
I can.
Okay.
Can look at that and see
We
if I can
can-
go from there.
we can chat with him and just see.
Yeah.
It's not like it's a rush, but
Perfect.
I'll put my ideas together and we can try and incorporate some of those.
Sounds good.
Alrighty. Why don't we get through other business and then we can take a quick break before the public hearing. We've been sitting here for a couple hours. Item I1 is consideration of approval of a grant agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and TDJC LLC for the Sheridan Housing Project in the amount of $163,992, effective for 12 months upon final execution.
Sure, these are funds that are given to us for this project by the CCO Share Fund, and it's for the completion of the housing for families and individuals in recovery. And the first part is occupied and the development looks really good, so it's encouraging to see it moving along. So I'd move approval.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, Commissioner Sterrett moves approval. Is there further discussion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Sterrett?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Item I2, consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to agreement number 173270 between Yamhill County and the Oregon Health Authority, reinstating the choice model service agreement and adding funding in the amount of $98,334.97 retroactive to December 31st of 2022 through June 30th of 2023.
And this is for support of individuals in the community with high mental health needs, so I would move approval.
Okay. Commissioner Sterrett moves approval. Is there further questions or discussion?
No.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, we will take a quick 5-10 minute break and be back for our public hearing. Thank you.
It's on the beach.
All right, welcome back, everybody. We'll wait for Commissioner, there's Commissioner Johnson. Okay, we will reopen our formal session. It is 12:23 and we will reopen at item J, which is our public hearing. J1 is a hearing on a public nuisance in consideration of an alleged violation of the solid waste ordinance. Commissioners, is that right? Commission. And this is continued from January 26th of 2023. Okay, so we had kind of an extensive overview of the issue before. Mr. Lee is clearly not here, and I believe we've now given him a month since that last time.
I believe so.
Okay. And Christian's not here, but I did ask him on Tuesday to just confirm that we got the notice right, and we did. However, he did have Mr. Lee had a medical emergency after the last hearing, so that's just something to consider. Perhaps is why he's not here.
That could be, I don't know. My understanding is he had been released from the hospital, but
Okay,
I have not heard from him and I have not seen him when I've been out to the property.
okay.
I was out there yesterday, that's correct.
Yesterday, okay. Okay, so we are being asked to consider an order that would order the property to be abated and then place a lien. Is that technically? Okay.
The property owner is presented with a bill and we were discussing the possibility of letting him make a payment plan towards that bill.
So I talked to Mike this morning and I said it might be a little nicer if we recommend that the board, so first you have to give him 30 days to clean it himself. That's under the ordinance. If you do or find that there is a nuisance exists, if you find that a nuisance exists, he gets 30 days to clean it up. And so what Mike and I suggest is we're also requesting that the board grant Mike permission to I'm trying to think if I need to get a writ for this, but I don't think so. I think there's enough authority under our ordinance to get on the property and clean it up ourselves. And then work out a payment plan with Mr. Lay to pay us back for that cost. And only if he doesn't pay, then we'll look at doing a lien. Rather than just go straight to the lien. That was what I recommended to Mike this morning that we request from you all.
Okay. So since this came in front of us, I believe that was January 12th was the first
The
time it came in
original
front of us.
hearing, yeah.
You know, there's been a lengthy process to get him to sort of comply with this.
He's been under enforcement since January 31st of 2020.
2020. However, he's had, various health problems and whatever. So since January 12th, so can you give us a breakdown of what's occurred since January 12th?
As far as I can tell, there was a blue Jeep that was there on the property and I think maybe a couple plastic barrels. Not much has been removed from the property. I mean, there may have been some minor progress, but I'd have to look at past photos. It's not much. The bulk of the items are still there. The motorhome that's been stripped down to the frame and it's now rusting on the side of the road. Two abandoned pickup trucks that have been there for, at least a decade.
Mhm.
Nothing's happened with them. The fiberglass boat full of weeds is just abandoned on the property. There's an old recliner, water heater, abandoned appliances, scrap metal. all kinds of things just littered about the property.
Okay. Do we have an estimate on if we had to go in and clean it up, what that might be?
We do not. The way it works is once we have authority to enter the property, then I can bring trash out contractors to the property, and I typically solicit bids from 2 contractors. I do have one that I've used extensively that has proven to be the cheapest, and he's out of Turner, and Public Works Department has used him extensively as well too. And he's very efficient. He's done several cleanups for us in the past. But again, it's competitive bid, but historically he's been the lowest bidder by a large margin.
And when we're going on his property and doing this, are we only focused on sort of large items, or, you know, where's the line between we're taking that because it's been sitting here for a decade versus, you know, we're taking something that's on, you know, outside your front porch that might be of sentimental value, you know, where's the line of?
That's a good question. Essentially, we go after mostly the scrap items that I'm aware of. I have not been down to his house, but I was informed by someone who has been down there that there was a large accumulation of just garbage bags piled up around the house. So I haven't been down there to observe that, but that's a possibility that that may still exist around the house, and that would be included in the order too. And, you know, particularly from the standpoint that then that attracts rats and other rodents, and then they spread to other properties, and that's a concern for the other property owners. And, you know, I know he's very frail now, but in speaking with the property owners in the past, there's I would say a genuine fear from the neighbors that they were quite concerned. They didn't want him to know that he made the complaint, although it had to have been one of the two, since it's essentially a dead end road. It's not like people drive down there frequently. And he was a very imposing man when I first encountered him back in 2020. And I don't know when the onset of that was, somewhere between summer of 21 and when he was most recently here, because I had not seen him since he had been in court.
Yeah. Okay.
So back to what you said, Jody, about, thanks, Mike, the writ. For us to go on the property, I know that was a component of our ordinance. So if you can explain just the protections around, just his property rights, our liability, and also the component of the house, the garbage, because that's something that's hearsay.
That's correct.
And so at this point, we're just looking at the solid waste that's visible to the neighbors and what's inside his house. We're not talking about what's in.
No,
you're saying
not
outside.
just on the outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the writ piece, and then also the other thing I just want to be real careful about, and I'm not sure because we've never had one of these to this extent before the board, is when we're talking about an individual, I believe this person's name is in our public records, in our information, and we're talking about the specifics of their health and variety of different things. What are the safeguards for his protections? And I'm just looking at that piece right now. And then also the maximum grace that we can extend, knowing that his physical issues are at play here, but also this has been going on for a while. So I get that.
So, okay, so first I will probably file for a writ because I'm going to want, even though I think that our code gives us the authority to go on the property, so long as there's a finding from the board, I'm going to ask for a writ because I'm going to want to have the sheriff's office go with him. And they wouldn't go without a writ. As far as how to know the difference in terms of protecting the stuff of his, make sure I get this question right. The things of his that that are not, that don't fall under the definition of solid waste are not somehow disposed of by accident or otherwise. Is that your question?
No,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
talking about just the premises, the fact that we're talking about visible solid waste that the neighbors can see, and that we're not talking about access to the premises and to his home. And that is what you said, Mike, it's outside. It's what you can see. outside.
Exterior of the property,
Exterior.
yeah, I've never requested permission to enter into someone's actual residence. It's always
Yeah,
the
we would need
physical
a,
property.
we would need a
Okay.
complaint. And
All
there
right.
would be a process to that. This is just the outside that he's requesting your permission to abate.
So if we were to say, all right, what our plan is, and we do this contingent on, so a writ and allowing the county to clean it up with a contractor contingent on him having another 30 days to figure it out, which obviously there have been a number of those. So I'm just saying that we extend the maximum just to say we did. And having said that, we have already issued an order to go clean it up.
So you can give him as much time, the owner, as much time as you want to clean it. It's the minimum has to be 30 days. He gets at least 30 days to try to clean it himself. So in the board's order, if they find a nuisance exists, that would lay out how much time that he has to clean it up himself. And if it's not cleaned by that deadline, that's the point at which you are granting Mike permission to enter the property and start the cleanup ourselves. Yeah, so it will be a two-step order that would come from the board. And the length of time that you give him to clean it is entirely up to you. Did that answer?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, so I haven't been out there either. And I was under the assumption that his home was fairly close to the road, but it sounds like that's not the case.
No, the home's not visible from the road. The shop building is the building that's closest to the road and is the greatest source of the accumulation. And then it transitions down the road where he has the abandoned motorhome that he's stripped down to the frame, pulled the motor out. There's auto parts here and there, just a lot of things just kind of haphazardly.
So
Right
most
about-
of this is, I mean, you can see the road in the photos, but most of this is sort of clustered up. by
A
the
lot of
road.
it is clustered up near the
Okay.
road where the neighbors can see the bulk of it.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Johnston, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So back, partially back to what Mary said. So when you guys, or when we vote on how much time we give him to clean up, are you coming back to us again before you get your writ to go clean, before the county goes and cleans the property? Or is this all done right now? Let's say we give him the minimum 30 days and the 30 days is up. You guys come before us again, or no, it is the Turner company or whoever Mike agrees to have go in there, they go in immediately, or does it come back before us again?
We can do either or. So we were asking now, so we didn't have to come back in 30 days, but we certainly can.
So I guess I would want to come back one more time just to see if there is progress, because, this is another step of the board has agreed to have bids for this property to be cleaned up, which I'm assuming we've never made it to that point before with this gentleman, right?
No, we have not.
So I guess I would want it to come before the board before the writ is issued. And then my
Go ahead, sorry.
second concern would be there's multiple vehicles pictured. Some of, I don't know, I guess some people would consider antique. There's a Jeep and another older pickup truck there. At what point is who deciding what's going to get hauled off, crushed, whatever? I mean, a vehicle could have a title. Where do we run into issues here as far as liability with the county?
The contractor takes on that liability when they agree to take on the job. What I look at primarily is there are people that collect vehicles and they have an articulable future. that they're going to make something of it. But I know that, like in the case of those pickup trucks, they've been there at least 8 years since I've been here. And they have broken windows, they don't have all the pieces, so they don't run. And at what point do you become a wrecking yard? Like what's the cutoff number? How many vehicles do you have before it's considered a wrecking yard? And that's the concern of the neighbors, is the unsightliness of the property. And I know that one neighbor had a property for sale at one time. I don't think it sold. I don't know that that was the determining factor. Maybe he was asking too much, but I know that it was expressed to me that that is an impediment to him and his financial well-being as far as the valuation of his property, having to live next door to Mr. Lee.
I guess my biggest concern is the county deciding whether, and I'm just going to go back to these two particular vehicles, deciding that there's whether they are garbage, solid waste, or they have value to him to want to keep. And we now are becoming the determiner of that.
Let me try. So what I will recommend to Mike is our agreement with whatever contractor gets selected. We'll have language in there that clarifies the process for removing vehicles. And generally speaking, I'll probably want that process to be the same process that we follow when we remove vehicles from tax foreclosed properties, for instance. They get towed by a towing company. They're kept according to those statutes. And so there will be a way for them to, there will be a way for the owner to go get those back without fear of them being crushed, as long as it's within those statutory deadlines, processes and stuff like that. So that is one way to sort of keep the contractor from doing something that we as a county wouldn't do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a great point. I mean, some of this, there's an RV, a white RV that looks like someone's living in it. It has a generator, a stove, a wine fridge outside. I mean, it looks like somebody's.
That was the initial complaint. He had 4 RVs on the property initially. He did remove
Okay,
that RV.
okay.
The only remaining, well, there's one in the back that is, I don't even know if it's habitable. He has one parked next to the shop. And I've not heard reports from any of the neighbors, anyone's living in it. I think the biggest complaint from the neighbors is the one that's been stripped down to the frame and the motors removed, and it's just rusting away alongside the road.
Is that this one?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Which is clearly by the road.
No. Berry Creek.
I would say along the same lines of what Commissioner Johnston is concerned about, I would be concerned about seeing the proposed cost, because we know how much it is to tow RVs and all those things. It's pretty high.
Actually, in that case, that RV, Mr. Lee, I'm doubtful that he got an asbestos survey, and he stripped all of the components off of the RV that are the most costly part of disposal. Essentially, what's left there is the cab. In the most recent photos, it's just the cab and the frame and the tires. And so that should not have any problem as far as disposal, because there's nothing left to it.
Okay. Okay, so we can set the time
Yeah. So.
and then,
So what you would do is first you'd have to make a finding on whether or not there's a public nuisance. And if you do find that there is one, set a time frame for him to clean it himself. And then at the end of that time frame, Mike will come back and give you an update as to whether or not it's clean, and we'll go from there.
I have a suggestion, Chair, and this would take into consideration Commissioner Johnston's concerns and mine as well. And that is, it's been since 2020.
20.
Yes,
Okay.
January 31st,
Okay.
2020.
So really, this is an an exercise in by saying, here's another 30 days, will you clean it up? I think we've already danced that dance and it hasn't happened. So what I would recommend is sort of the best of both worlds. And that is what we are saying, please either have it cleaned up or have a plan in the works or a contract or something that shows us it's not going to just be when I feel like it or when I get to it, but something that is concrete and it's definable. And if in 30 days that hasn't happened, then staff has direction to get the writ and to go out for the bid. So it's not another, okay, Mike has to come back and we have to do this again when it doesn't appear that there's going to be much movement in 30 days. So we can do both.
That sounds good to me.
And so what we can do is I don't know if Kit was about to talk. What we can do is exactly that. And then what we can do is we can come back to the board after we get the bids so that there's a cost discussion too, if you want. Because I know Kit had mentioned he wants, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Who's up?
You are.
So to that extent of what Mary brought up, what the bids, if we get the bids, is there an option where we go to the property owner and be like, this is how much it's going to cost if the county gets involved to clean this up? Is there a point? Well, we don't know because we don't know what the bid is, but I guess my thought process was, do we help him either share a cost or whatever to get this property cleaned up so everybody's happy? But we don't know what the bid is. So I guess I'd want to see what the cost is for the county to go clean this up before our time frame that we set for him to clean his property up. So it'll help us determine, I guess, how to proceed. But also, Mary's right. It's been over 2 years waiting for him to do this too.
And the other thing is the payment plan, that's an option. And the only way it becomes a lien, payment plan doesn't pan out.
Defaulted, yeah.
Because along those lines, I was gonna, based on what you've observed, has it been an unwillingness to get it cleaned up or an inability to get it cleaned up?
I'm not exactly sure, but I can tell you after nearly 15 years of code enforcement, when you're dealing with people that are hoarders, oftentimes it's the difficulty of they see value in things that
Okay.
just isn't there. And well, someday I'm gonna make this into this. And it's like, well, but it's been there for 8 years. When is that day? Well, when the time comes and well, the neighbors aren't real happy with that. You know, we need to see some movement here. And it's their ability to let go of things. And I have experience with people that have been hoarders. They've cleaned their property and gone to new property and they just fell back into their old habits. So it's hard to say.
And through the pictures in the packet, there's stuff coming and going. So he is doing stuff, bringing in new equipment, stripping it down, whatever he's doing. So I guess as far as the inability of wanting to clean up, it seems that there is new projects that roll in and out of there.
I have wondered if he's scrapping because over the years you see different appliances come and go. And you know, how many electric ranges do you go through on an average lifespan to warrant how many he has on his property? So those are all essential questions.
Regarding,
And we
sorry.
to come up with a payment program, we still need that bid to come up with a payment program.
Correct.
Right. I guess my concern is if you go out for a bid, you have to provide a scope of work. And that's where I'm sort of struggling here. I mean, I'm looking at $100,000 tractors sitting on this property. So
I wasn't considering the tractor. I believe the tractor's operational. It's more the scrap metal, the screen doors, the rusting bar stool, the rusting air conditioner, the refrigerator that's just been there forever next to the black pickup truck, that fiberglass boat that's just laying there. the RV, there's old axles, tires, an electric range, a water heater, all these kinds of miscellaneous things that are just sitting out there, and he's done nothing with them.
You mentioned,
Go ahead.
sorry, Chair. Mike, you mentioned a scrap yard or impound yard or something along the lines where there was a definition and there was perhaps a zoning or an ordinance that would define what that is. So clearly, based on where he lives and he has none of those,
No,
so that they're really, that's kind of where the rub is.
exactly. He's not zoned for having a wrecking yard or a
Right.
scrap yard, and
Okay.
that's essentially what he has there right now.
Zoned or permitted, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, based on some of what is in these pictures, you know, the very nice tractor, the Corvette, the other things that we're seeing, you know, perhaps it's not a financial issue. Perhaps it is something more like you talked about where you just kind of can't stop bringing stuff in. Yeah, I mean, I would want to see the bids, and I would probably want to start with a smaller scope, start along the road, perhaps. You know, we don't have to clean it all up. We can start with the stuff that's sort of most egregious on the road. And having him know that and know what the cost is and know that, you know, he now has a lien against him. And that the intention is, look, you still have more work to do. You know, we took the big stuff, but there's more work here. We can keep going down this road, or you can voluntarily do it. You know, maybe we start smaller, and so that we're not just going full bore and saying, you know, here's all this stuff that needs to go, and it's a $50,000 bill, and you know, it's kind of a shock. So
Mike, do you see any issues having worked with other contractors on other cleanups? Do you think you're going to be able to get a realistic estimate just without entering the property?
Without, and well, to clear what's from the road, yeah, I don't know. They probably would want to enter the property
Right.
to look at some of those items, and that would be
That would be the tough part, because if
Yeah.
they don't have the writ,
right.
you would probably result in a higher bid just to backstop in case
right?
Right.
they couldn't account for everything.
Right.
So the writ is sort of we don't necessarily need a writ to enter the property. I want the writ because I want a deputy to go with Mike.
Yeah.
And the deputies need that writ because of the use of force language and all this other stuff. So it's not like he can't enter the property with a board order. He could. I want to protect Mike. So
Yeah.
that's why I wanted to get
I
a
would
writ.
agree.
So that's sort of that piece.
Now, I do know that when we've done these in the past, there have been some people that once we come out for the bids, suddenly a fire is lit under them and a lot of cleanup happens because they're aware, oh,
Yeah.
there's some big costs coming my way. So there's always that possibility as well, too. Now that he sees that there's action being taken, I think it's certainly going to get his attention.
Sure.
Maybe he'll be interested in working with our contractor and hiring them directly in the next 30 days.
Yeah, maybe. Can't.
Possibility.
So we declare a public nuisance. And approve a writ.
So you would declare that a public nuisance exists, and then you would set the timeline for him to clean it.
Okay.
And then I guess as a parallel order to that, you would authorize me to go seek a writ of assistance to get the assistance of the sheriff's office to enforce our ordinance, essentially. And then that writ could be used to both enter it for the contractor, and then it could also be used for the actual cleanup too. Why?
I'm just trying to figure out.
Anyway,
But can
The-
the writ be activated during the timeline?
I will, no, we would have to give him the full 30 days.
Oh.
I don't see anything wrong with us going on the property to get quotes. I don't think our ordinance necessarily allows for that. So the writ would have to be the authority that grants us that access. So I would probably just recommend that we wait till his 30
Yeah.
days or whatever is up, and then we'll just the next step will be writ for to gain access for the bids, and then we'll just go down this one step at a time.
And you'd advise him of what bid was for? So he would have a number then he wouldn't have it within the 30 days.
Right.
So.
Because it
never mind.
sounds like, as Jody was proposing, we wouldn't be able to, until we had the writ and had access after the 30 days is when we would have the contractors come out and give us estimates on the actual cleanup at that point.
But we could also come back to the board, and the board could give him another 30 days.
Sure.
That's fine.
Or we don't have to extend it at all. We can just voluntarily cooperate with him and be in a back and forth situation. So. Okay. Well, I think at this point, I'd say we need to start with the declaring a public nuisance, and I would probably set it at 30 days because otherwise we really don't have any movement forward or any options to even negotiate with him. So. So how does that come forward? Is it a motion?
Yeah, so let me get the wording right here.
That's what I was gonna ask. That's why I was giving you the look before when you were trying to put together a motion.
Could we have a motion that included all of the steps? Or does it have to be one to declare a violation?
Well, you could just do it as one motion. That's fine by me. So the motion,
I feel like this is sort of the first step, but the hard work is going to come next if he doesn't clean it up in 30 days. So.
But we're just basically saying, okay, we're gonna go through this again in a month.
Yeah, but we
Instead
have
of,
to. We have to wait a
no,
month.
well, what I'm saying is that instead of, we can sort of keep the ball rolling, keep the momentum going. Still declare it a violation and barring no cleanup in 30 days, direct staff to get a writ and to get bids. I mean, if it's cleaned up in 30 days, there's nothing more to talk about.
Right, but they would have to come back in front of us to get the writ in 30 days.
No.
Oh, no.
I think
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner?
I agree with Mary. I think we combine those two. And so he has the 30 days, but there's also a writ after that 30 days for them to go get the bid. So they don't have to come back before us to get the bid. And then our next meeting is like, oh, we'll go get the bid. What's our payment program? There's a lot more questions after that. So I agree with Mary. Let's get all this done, but no cleanup until they come before us again.
that makes sense.
Well, and I would just add that depending on what the price tag's going to be for the cleanup, our procurement rules and signing, we may be coming back with the board anyways to execute that contract
Yeah.
for the cleanup. So there might be an additional step. I have no idea what a cleanup for like this would actually cost, and I'm not going to put you on the spot to ballpark it, but
They run a wide range, and some of the contractors, it's shocking the amount that they try to charge.
Mhm.
So I have
More
one
than
guy I
25,000?
always go to, he usually prevails. So
is it more than 25,000?
I don't think it would be more than 25,000.
Okay. All right,
Because the scrap metal has value.
that's right.
Hmm.
I figured that it would not. Okay.
The payment plan piece of that, who determines what that payment plan looks like? Working with him to come up with something that works for him?
What I would probably do is say we get to the point where he agrees to let us clean it up essentially. And we say, okay, here's the payment plan. I would put something in writing and recommend it to him. If he was good with it, then we'd bring it in front of the board because only you can authorize a payment plan for the county.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But we're front loading the cost of the cleanup through what budget? Okay, well, I guess if we can declare, a date effective for the writ, that's fine. We can do it now.
So it'll be more just, so how I would recommend the motion would be, I move to find that a violation of the solid waste code exists. To grant the owner, 30 days to clean it up per the ordinance. And at the end of that 30 days, direct staff to seek a writ from the court to go seek, cleanup bids. And then come back to the board and provide an update.
Do you need a writ to get bids or do you need a writ to get on the property to get bids?
The latter.
Mostly for Mike's safety. Commissioner Johnston, did you have another question? You had your hand up.
Kinda. So if we do end up getting the writ for somebody to go on the property to bid it, are we bidding just what is seen from the road? Because this is just a complaint from the neighbors and what can be seen. Or once we're on that property, we have to go after everything, even if it's hidden behind a barn. But we are not going inside of somebody's property, correct?
No,
No.
no entry in any buildings.
Well, and that's kind of what I was alluding to with the scope. Perhaps we get a bid for, different levels, right? You clean up where it's right on the road versus going this far versus going the whole thing. I mean, I think that's probably advantageous.
I think I will recommend to Mike that stick with what we know exists right now and what the board has seen. And then if additional cleanup is needed, we'll come back. And because we might have to go through another process if it's pretty extensive, more so than you're anticipating, then yeah, we would clean up what you have been able to take pictures of, clean that up, and then we'll come back and we'll go through another process for the rest of it. Because then you'll have more evidence for a new proceeding. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How big is the property again? How many acres?
I think it part of it's wooded, so I think it's several acres in size, but
Okay.
the area we're looking at is pretty much that area that's visible from the road.
6.5 acres, it looks like. Okay.
We're not searching out more to find though, are we? We're
No.
just, so far you have not gone on the property. You've just taken pictures from public road.
Correct.
And that's what we're looking at. And we're not going after looking for more to do to clean up, correct?
Correct. The only concern I had is that I had heard a report that he had an accumulation of garbage bags of household garbage. And that's a health hazard to have that just sitting out. And if that were identified, then that should be brought into the scope of work.
Is there any known family that we have contacts for?
Our chief electrical inspector, Mark Pendergrass, has worked a few jobs with Mr. Lee in the past. And he had been in contact, I believe, with Mark's brother. And there had been some discussion in the last, 30, 45 days about getting some drop boxes, but nothing's come of that since. There's just only been talk. And it comes down to who's going to pay for it. It doesn't sound like Mark was willing to pay for any of that.
I guess I still want to proceed forward with the writ and and the cost to clean up and all that. But I guess I'd want somebody, if there is family, to reach out to them and be like, look, this is what we've done, just so you know, this is coming. Because he'll get a notice to his property, but no family or somebody that could help him are going to get notices. And the only way for them to know is if the property owner contacts them. Is it okay for us to reach out to a family member and let them know what we're doing?
I can certainly talk to Mark and see if he has contact number for his brother, and I could reach out.
Yeah, I want to make sure we're not violating his
Mhm.
privacy though.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he doesn't want his family to know.
That could be.
Too. Yeah.
Although this is a public forum. Okay, well, I'm fine proceeding with what Jody said. As long as, you know, after the bids come in, we can see them and sort of reassess.
Sounds good.
Any more questions or concerns?
So is that the motion?
Yes, so moved.
Do you want to, can you
Do you
restate
want me to
that?
read for Carolina's sake?
Yeah.
So the motion would be, move to find, I'm gonna read this actually from the ordinance. I'm gonna move, or you would move to find that a violation exists, or order that the violation be abated within 30 days. And if it's not, grant a directive to staff to seek out a writ of assistance to enter the property and get quotes for cleanup and return to the board with an update.
So that update would be after 30 days.
Do we have to be?
Probably longer.
Abated by the property owner and not like Yamhill County is going to roll in there and do it.
Sorry, Commissioner, can you repeat that?
Do we need owner in there?
You're having some technical difficulties. We can't hear your audio.
Not important.
Not that important. Huh?
Switch to sign language.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I will move that we declare the property at 15865 Northwest Berry Creek Road, McMinnville, Oregon, 97128 as a public nuisance. And we will set the timeline for Mr. Lee to have his property cleaned up by, I don't know what 30 days is. March 11th.
Yes.
By March 11th of 2023. If that does not occur to our satisfaction, then we approve county staff to acquire a writ of assistance and enter the property for the purpose of evaluating the cleanup and soliciting bids for cleanup. And at that point, we will bring this back forward in front of the board to discuss what happens with the bids. All right, that's my motion. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same. Oop. We didn't hear you, Kit.
Yes.
All opposed, same sign. All right. Motion passes. And thank you for your continued work, Mike. This has been a long road for this.
It
So
has.
Thanks,
Yes,
Mike.
indeed.
Thanks.
You're
John.
welcome.
appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
Let's talk later. Oh, let's talk.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, so that brings us, we're done with our public hearing. We will come back into the agenda at announcements. I have quite a few here. I'll try and go quickly. So I did a follow-up meeting with ODF on the wildfire district process, and they have their 3 people. You know, we recently approved our 3 folks, and so they are shooting for March 9th as their first kickoff meeting for that process. The goal is to do from 1 to 4 p.m. and it will start with a tour. So if you're interested in going out with them and kind of seeing how they evaluate these properties, it sounds like it's going to be March 9th, which is a Thursday, but they're shooting for the afternoon from 1 to 4, and they will meet at the McMinnville Fire Department and go from there. So I'm going to try and see if I can make that. I'm just curious as to how they assess these properties and where they target. So we've had some questions on planning commission vacancies. There was some confusion on that based on the last planning commission meeting last week. However, Ken has notified me that the public notice for our planning commissioner vacancies will close on February 15th. And then correct me if I'm wrong in any of this, but February 15th. And then the planning commission is going to try and meet in a work session or special meeting and have recommendations to us by March 2nd. As you know, we have at least, I think it's 2 vacancies on the planning commission, and that's a very critical board for us. So I want to make sure that we can get those folks on and appointed. And sort of a subset of that is my concern that the docket that that is regarding zoning code amendments, which is a very broad topic with some pretty significant changes. I would prefer to have a full board discuss that. And so if we are not seeing recommendations to us until March 2nd, that's the same date as the planning commission meeting. So we can't really expect them to jump in on the same day and know what's going on. So I would hope that they would move that. Well, actually, I don't hope. I would expect that they would move it to the April 6th meeting. So I just want to make sure my colleagues are on board with that, and that is communicated to the planning commission, because there seems to be an awful lot of confusion every week as to what our intent is with that and what our direction has been from the board. So commissioners, any issues with that?
No, Chair.
No.
Okay, great, thank you. An issue with the bypass or some concerns with the bypass came up from MWACT. I think that was last week or maybe the week before, but you know, ODOT has been communicating that they need something from us in order to make sure they meet their spring bid timeline. Ken, you were going to follow up with Andrew Walker, I think his name is, with ODOT. Any movement on that or clarification from them?
No, not necessarily. What I think Jody,
So I have the document, the IAMP.
right.
I don't remember what it stands for, but the plan. Working with Ken Friday, we're just going to tweak 2 sections in there where they said that they were going to ask us to update our ordinance. We're going to change that to explain the directive.
Okay.
And then I send it to their legal counsel. I think that's who sent it to Ken. And as long as they're okay with it, then I'll bring it back to the board for adoption. So
Okay.
we're gonna rush that guy through.
Yeah, the concern that they said was that it could potentially hold up whatever. So I just want to make sure that we're not doing that. So,
No.
Which
that-
is news, because all they
Yeah.
did was ask us for comment.
right.
They didn't say that it required any board action when we first got this last fall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
Okay, so next week we can see that.
I'm gonna try like heck.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. I'm sure we've all been sort of fielding concerns over the explosions in and around McMinnville lately or the past weekend. The sheriff's department did investigate that, and it seems to be some tannerite explosions on private property. Not really so much we can do about it. We have a noise ordinance in the county, but it's very vague and really doesn't cover anything specifically that would allow us to, come in and sort of regulate that. So I don't know that I'm interested in revising the noise ordinance at this time. But obviously, if there's damage to property that surrounds that particular person's home, that's another issue. So at this point, that's all we know. It's all we can do. It's not pleasant, but I hope that maybe some public pressure will, be applied to make better choices. So we're not shaking people's homes every weekend. The McMinnville Task Force on Crime, Homelessness, and Public Safety met this week. If you recall, this was a effort by folks living in McMinnville. It was kind of spearheaded by Mike and Kim Morris, where over 300 people signed this petition to have the city create a task force to address the rising crime, homelessness issues, and vagrancy, and just the overarching public safety element. There were over 25 people there at this meeting this week. It was very impressive to see all these business owners come together on a Tuesday afternoon. Went over a wide variety of issues, but Councilor Geary is from McMinnville, is the liaison for the city, and he was there and he was taking copious notes. And so hopefully we see some improvement. One of the issues that was discussed is that the city of McMinnville has a municipal judge, but that judge only holds court once a week. And when you hold court once a week, you cannot process people through the system. And if they go to jail first, and then they're trying to get arraigned by that specific date, we can only hold them for so long. So it's this never-ending cycle of, quote unquote, catch and release, and it's becoming a problem. And it's affecting, the police officers' ability to do their job and enforce the rules and the laws. But I was pretty shocked to hear some of the stories. I mean, we're talking about daily occurrences of people camping outside of our businesses on 3rd Street and elsewhere, right around here, frankly, and using the bathroom on the sidewalk or on the front door of these businesses. I mean, it's some of these stories, it's mind blowing. And so I really want to make sure that we have better cooperation between our court system, our sheriff, and the municipal system, and make sure that we can kind of catch the low-hanging fruit of some of these issues that are happening, and really just unfortunately encouraging this behavior to continue. This is an economic development issue. I mean, every single business owner around that table was concerned about their business. They described people being here from out of town who were going in for an appointment at one of these businesses and stepped in the human feces that was on the sidewalk and basically said, never again. I am never coming back to this place again. And so it's a huge problem, unfortunately, and it needs to be addressed. We're putting a lot of time and effort into economic development and making sure our cities are livable. So I'm very encouraged to see this group come together. Huge kudos to the Morrises. They've done a lot of work on this, and hopefully we can make some progress. So I'll be reporting back. I think we're going to meet every month, so I'll kind of be reporting back and letting you know how that's going. And if you want to participate, absolutely let me know, and I'll give you the dates.
Do we have an official spot on that task force as a representative of the county?
It's really it's not a board, so there's no really official positions. The mayor of McMinnville assigned as a sort of a duty to Councilor Geary to attend these task force meetings. They've asked me to attend for the purpose of making sure that we have the right county leadership or individuals that work for the county participating as well, so that questions can be answered there in the meeting versus, oh, let me go ask so-and-so. So that's kind of what we're doing now is,
Good.
so, who needs to be there. So I think that was it. Commissioners, any announcements?
Here, I would just say that, speaking of foreclosed properties, the Housing Authority's Affordable Housing Corporation has decided to go ahead and go forward with the purchase of the Dayton House.
Mhm.
And we appreciate that. Updates from AOC, a lot of work going on Measure 110, aid and assist, behavioral health workforce, and also the shortage of health professionals, including veterinarians, which is becoming more and more significant. And also costing out behavioral health services. Instead of the state just saying, here's an amount of money, go figure it out. This would actually be, this is the cost and we need it covered. So a lot of work going on at HHS and governance and revenue.
I saw a report from Measure 110, the funding for that said that they only served about 16,000 people
Mhm.
statewide. And that's just stunning considering the amount of money.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Commissioner Johnston, any announcements?
Nothing.
I heard the fair, I don't know if you can, well, let's not spoil it. I think the fair is going to announce who the musical acts are on Valentine's Day, right? I
Yep.
think it's so we're looking forward to that. Okay, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, I will adjourn the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for February 9th, 2023. It is 1:20 in the afternoon. Thank you.